stand and cast our gaze to the horizon of a digital revolution, it's essential to envision the internet we want, a realm that reflects our values, fosters inclusivity, and amplifies voices that empower. The internet we aspire is one that champions accessibility, ensuring that knowledge and resources are within each and every individual, regardless of their background or location. It's a space where education flourishes, ideas thrive, and innovation knows no bounds. The TTMAG believes that privacy and security are the keystones of this digital landscape. It is a realm where individuals' data is respected and safeguarded, where trust is not just a concept, but a foundation upon which the internet is built. It's a space where technology serves humanity without compromising personal autonomy. In the 2023 incarnation of our IGF, we spotlighted cybersecurity, as this should be a top priority with collective efforts among nations, organizations, and individuals to combat cyber threats. A resilient and reliable internet infrastructure is vital to ensure uninterrupted flow of information and services, preventing disruptions that could have widespread consequences. In the internet we want, misinformation and digital manipulation should be addressed through collective responsibility. Platforms should employ effective moderation tools and algorithms to curb the spread of false information while respecting freedom of expression. Media literacy programs should empower users to critically evaluate information, fostering a digital environment built on trust. In terms of innovation, the ideal internet encourages a diverse and competitive landscape. Open standards and interoperability should be promoted, allowing for seamless collaboration and integration of technologies. Startups and small businesses should thrive, contributing to a vital digital economy. This will be thoroughly ventilated by esteemed panelists today and tomorrow. Cultural diversity should be celebrated, and the internet should provide a platform for expression of diverse voices. Multilingual content and accessibility features should be prioritized, breaking down language barriers and ensuring that the internet is truly a global space. Environmental sustainability should not be overlooked. The internet we want acknowledges the environmental impact of digital infrastructure and seeks eco-friendly solutions, minimizing energy consumption and promoting responsible practices. Ultimately, the internet we want is a powerful tool for positive change, fostering a global community that values connectivity, collaboration, and progress. It should be a force for good, empowering individuals, bridging gaps, and contributing to a more equitable and sustainable world. However, to realize this vision requires collective action. It demands collaboration among governments, technology companies, civil societies, and individuals, like each and every one of you here this morning. Each of us bears a responsibility to contribute positively, to create content that informs, uplifts, and inspires. This has been the vision and mission of the TTMAG. After all, it is precisely why we are all here today. As we embark on this journey, let's remember the power that rests within each keystroke, each click, and each share. Let's wield this power with conscientiousness, using it to elevate, connect, and make the world and the internet a better place. Let us shape an internet that future generations will inherit with pride, a digital landscape that echoes our aspirations, our values, and our unwavering commitment to progress. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my pleasure to welcome you to participate in our discussions on the Internet we want. It is a great honor to now introduce His Excellency Peter Cavendish, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Delegation Lead of the European Union. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman Gosine, for your excellent speech. I will start by saying that I observe all protocols. I'm extremely pleased to be here today for reasons that will soon become evident. Clearly, when we talk about the Internet and its future, we need to look to its recent past. And of course, the Internet is relatively new, so the recent past is the history. The Internet was there before the World Wide Web, but I have to underline that the World Wide Web came out, in fact, of European public sector money, which has been spent on the European Nuclear Research Centre, typically known by its French acronym CERN, Centre Européen Recherche Nucléaire. It had two scientists, Sir James Berners-Lee, who everybody knows about, and another, a Belgian scientist called Mr. Caillou. It was Mr. Caillou who made the term World Wide Web. Of course, it was Mr. Berners-Lee who created the search engines, the first server, the first web browser, and documenting formatting processes called HTML, hypertext markup languages, which gave us the World Wide Web that we are now living with. At the date that the scientists came up with these ideas, they considered the World Wide Web would be pacific. You can call it naivety, you can call it whatever you wish, but it was seen at the time that this should be a gift to humanity. And in that context, the European Union has protected legally the World Wide Web so that no commercial entity can take control of the World Wide Web. I repeat, it was seen as a gift to humanity. It was seen as being pacific. The idea of abuse of the Internet did not occur to those scientists or the European lawyers who protected the World Wide Web at the time of its creation. I have to say that we have now learned from malicious criminal purposes, misuse of the information shared, that there is a pessimistic bias today on the part of many scientists and others when they look at the future of the Internet, and in particular, artificial intelligence. Personally, professionally, I consider pessimistic bias is very useful. We should hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And in that context, in terms of the debate that this forum will have, and I wish to underline the term governance, it is very important that governance is planned for and maintained. The arrival of artificial intelligence, and according to some, we're not yet there. We have advanced data gathering, but artificial intelligence will arrive. We have to understand that this is a logical part of the acceleration of technological change, which has been recorded and noting as accelerating since the first part of the Industrial Revolution, i.e. every decade that goes by, new technologies arrive quicker and quicker and have transformative effects. It is clear that advanced data gathering or artificial intelligence is going to transform our societies. We can be pessimistic about the threats, the risks from abuse of artificial intelligence, but on the other side, we know that new technologies will create new jobs. We know that as societies become richer, people consume more services. So the skills that will be required in the future economy will shift. The issue is with what speed and what is the transition period going to be. Clearly, artificial intelligence or advanced data gathering is a new-ish challenge. And just as in the past, we've had with national, international, and other actors, we need to make sure we're not too far behind the curve. By its nature, it's very hard for governance to be with the curve because we are often very, very reactive. However, globally, there's more cooperation on cross-border transnational issues than ever before. I'll come back to that in a moment. This is an area where we can argue there's a need for more government rather than less, although many economists will talk about free enterprise and that there's no free lunch, which is a bit of a contradictory. This is an area where government has got to intervene. National and international legal systems will need to adapt to provide a paradigm for lawful uses and to prosecute abuses of the next phase of our technological development. In that regard, the European Union, we have the Latin American and Caribbean Digital Alliance, And under this, our objectives fall very much in line with that, for example, of the government here in this country. We're looking for a human-centric digital agenda. We're looking for digital transformation to basically transform the lives of our citizens. The European Union is in this country supporting many initiatives. We have with our UN Office for Counterterrorism, we fund them. We have a counterterrorism technology program which is underway with the security authorities in this country. We don't talk too much about it because, of course, it's security. This is a capacity building initiative, and we consider that it's proceeding very, very well. We also in the region have paid for the Latin America and Caribbean Cyber Competency Center, LAC4. If you're not already aware of it, please look it up. They hold webinars. They provide state-of-the-art hybrid training, a digital forensic lab, a cyber assessment range. The LAC4 provides the capacity to develop and provide technical, policy, and strategic level courses and simulations against cyber attacks. And it's a platform for doctrine development and research coordination. In addition, it's a channel for cyber capacity building projects, training modules, and materials developed in the European Union. So we have got the UN Office for Counterterrorism, the counterterrorism projects. We've got the Latin America Caribbean Cyber Competency Center. And in addition, we have a program to accelerate digital financial inclusion, and that is with the UN CDF, the United Nations Capital Development Fund. They are here in this country trying to extend digital banking services, for example, to those citizens that do not already use them. We're trying to support, of course, women, youth, medium, small enterprises. And the objective is to have all citizens with the digital support necessary to manage the financial and other parts of their lives. That is 3 projects. In addition, we now have BELA, which is called Bridging the Link Between Europe and Latin America. The European Union is paying for a superconductivity cable that runs from Portugal to Brazil. This cable is already there and working. And in the near term, we will have representatives to see how that cable can be brought to this country and other Latin American, Central American, and Caribbean countries. And the objective is to have all third-level institutions, vocational university, and other cooperating for research. Consider the benefits of being able to have all the universities in the region looking at for Sargasso seaweed, for example. This conductivity cable, BELA, will also be linked to an important computing facility in Panama and in Santiago de Chile. So we are working on many fronts. We're trying to give our partner nations, our friendly, like-minded nations, tools, equipment, training, capacity building. In addition, we have got Earth observation, electronic services, and products available to our partners. We have promoting other aspects of digital innovation with grants. And we expect that Trinidad and Tobago, which has got the third number of engineers. After the United States and Canada, this country has engineers to have trained to a very high level, and we consider that this country, with many of the governmental initiatives, the Ministry of Digitalization, the Memorandum of Understanding with Estonia, and with our, for example, we are supporting the government to bring in a Tier 4 data center to allow the government to digitalize much more of its services. That's costing approximately $50 million that we are contributing a part of that. So therefore, this country, with the educated population, with BELA, the cable, with the other investments, with the psychology, with the objectives of the administration, we consider that the country is ahead of the curve in terms of preparation for the digital world that is about to be the next step of the digital world's development that is about to be unleashed upon us. But nonetheless, it's an area, I think, increasingly where it has to be underlined that more and more cross-border interinstitutional exchanges will be necessary. And from this, we must not exclude the legal aspects, where legally we will have to be able to give the police and law enforcement authorities the tools to intervene against abuses and to prosecute malefactors. I remain, despite the pessimistic bias about dealing with new technologies, I remain optimistic that this will be an enabler of the next stage of economic growth and human development, that we will hopefully be able to use this to confront some of the challenges that are in front of us, in particular climate change, which threatens basically humanity's way of life worldwide. And I consider that this debate, this forum, is a part of necessary forums and exchanges for the best in the theatre, the best in the sector, to come forward and to exchange among themselves. I'm going to stop there, and I wish you all the very best for this forum and for the work that you are undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Carol Roach, who is the United Nations Internet Governance Forum Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group Chair. Wow, that was a mouthful. She's also Secretariat of United Nations Internet Governance Forum. Miss Roach.
Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to deliver opening remarks at the 7th Trinidad and Tobago Internet Governance Forum, and I would like to thank the 2024 Planning Committee for convening us all today. I am Carol Roach from the Ministry of Economic Affairs of the Government of the Bahamas, and I would like to thank and as someone coming from the Caribbean and with Trinidad roots through my father, I am a strong advocate for the inclusion of small island developing states, ensuring at every opportunity that their voices are not left out. In October 2023, I was appointed by the United Nations Secretary General as the chair of the Internet Governance Forum Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. Many stakeholders who are present at this important meeting greatly support the IGF as participants, session organizers, and speakers. I want you to know that we are all immensely grateful for your community's participation. It is stakeholders like you who make the IGF alive, relevant, and needed. As you may know, we successfully held the 18th annual IGF meeting in early October in Kyoto, which was opened with remarks from the UN Secretary General and the Prime Minister of Japan. I salute this year's Trinidad and Tobago's IGF topic, the Internet We Want, which is inspired by the overarching theme of the 18th annual IGF meeting, the Internet We Want, Empowering All People, with the aim to bring in a national perspective. The overarching theme of the annual IGF comprised 8 main sub-themes, some being covered at your event, such as the very, very important topic of artificial intelligence. Indeed, the increasing deployment of AI in our societies can empower and connect people, but could also further discrimination and deepen the digital divides. It is crucial to involve communities and peoples with diverse backgrounds, and we can only realize AI's potential to benefit everyone through collective global efforts that draw on the wide range of views of policymakers, technologists, investors, businesses, civil society, and academia from all countries and all regions. With that, I warmly invite you to consult the Kyoto IGF messages that distill the main takeaways from over 355 different sessions in which over 9,000 participants exchanged practices and insights. The IGF Leadership Panel, a strategic and multi-stakeholder body, which was appointed by the UN Secretary General to promote greater impact of IGF discussions, also took the opportunity to present their vision paper on the Internet We Want. The Internet We Want is also a call for collective action that urges all stakeholders to actively engage, contribute, and shape the future of the Internet. That is, whole and open, universal and inclusive, free-flowing and trustworthy, safe and secure, and rights respecting. With this, I would like to encourage you to also consult this paper and contribute your views to the leadership panel by March 1 via the IGF website. I also take this opportunity to invite you to the 19th IGF, which will be hosted by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Riyadh from the 15th to the 19th of December. As we are keen on providing a platform that better caters to the national and regional IGFs, we would welcome any ideas that could contribute to the 2024 cycle serving you better. Besides the annual IGF, and being Caribbean myself, I invite you to join me at the Caribbean IGF, as well as the Latin American and the Caribbean IGF, and also Youth LAC IGF being held later this year. This is with no doubt a great opportunity to connect with the rest of the region and share best practices in digital affairs, as well as outcomes of your meeting. Apart from next year's IGF, we are at an important moment for the internet and digital space, given several important processes happening. The UN member states continue negotiating the Global Digital Compact, or the GDC, aiming to have it agreed upon during the Summit of the Future in September 2024. Also, as a major outcome of the World Summit of the Information Society, the IGF's mandate will be part of the WSIS Plus 20 review process held in 2025. It is crucial that the national and regional IGF initiatives, including the Trinidad and Tobago IGF, be active contributors to these processes. I stress to make yourselves be heard. A multi-stakeholder community is critical for a safe, secure, unfragmented, and interoperable internet. In my role as chair of the MAG, I would like to invite you to work together for a strong IGF that stands for good multi-stakeholder governance of the internet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. And I'd like to now keep the program ticking and introduce someone who actually needs no introduction. He is well known across the circles, locally and internationally, and he will be the moderator for his panel. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce no other than Mr. Tracy Hackshaw. He is a former chairman of the TTMAG. In fact, I succeeded him as chairman, and he is now a director of the board of the Trinidad and Tobago Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. Mr. Tracy Hackshaw, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dev G, as we call him. I hope everyone's hearing me okay, and if not, let me know. So welcome to the first of our panel discussions as we kick off our TTIGF 2024 in earnest. The topic today, the first topic, is unlocking Trinidad and Tobago's ICT potential to global markets. And I just want to ensure that everyone knows that this topic was not my design alone. It's my colleague, Ms. Julie David from Nehurst, actually was the key architect of this topic, and just the face that was chosen to help moderate. But she's here as well, and she may even join in the discussion as we go forward. With me today on this panel, I would like to introduce, because I'm going to go by my list that I have here in the order I have, Camille Selvon Abraham, who is the head of animation at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome, Camille. If Camille has time, she will give us some background about herself. But we will move speedily along just by giving folks their just headline titles. Vashti Gayadeen, the Chief Executive Officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Services Industries. Welcome, Vashti, another colleague of mine. Following Vashti, we have Neville Alexander, who is the first male on the panel, which is interesting for a change. We have two females, and now we bring the males on. He is the Acting Assistant Director for Trade Promotion and Development at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, so representing the government stakeholder. And coming from the practitioner in the private sector, we have Mr. Kendall Tull, the ex-colleague of mine, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Telio Systems Limited. Welcome, Kendall. So as I said, if there's need be, you can give us some background on yourself when I call upon you, but we can just go straight into the discussion. So essentially, as we prep for this discussion, I wanted to start with everyone giving a brief overview, not more than maybe 5 to 7 minutes of your of the time that you have. I'm seeing Dev's screen coming up, not sure what's happening there, but maybe Dev, you may have to stop sharing your screen, I think. Perhaps that's what's happening. But you're coming up.
Yeah, I'm not sharing.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what's happening there. But what I'm going to ask now is the first presenter. I'm going to call upon Neville, Alexander, Ministry of Trade, to sort of give an overview from the government perspective as to what's been happening in this sector. From Ministry of Trade's perspective, as he would say, it's not the entire government, but from Ministry of Trade perspective, in terms of what they're doing in the sector, investment and domestic economy, focused on trade and investment, as we said. So Neville, over to you for your initial words, 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akshaw. And I stand on all previous protocols observed. And just to quickly say thank you for the opportunity to be part of this discussion on an important issue of all things digital trade on the internet we want. As you rightly said, I want to give a perspective largely from the Ministry of Trade and Industry's perspective, and what we would want to share and have a discussion on with respect to this issue is how really could we move in the export and the trading sphere of what we have domestically. And when we look at the space nationally, that digital space nationally, there are some positive things that we see that gives us encouragement that there is the ability to do more than we have been doing. When you look at our infrastructure and our connectivity performance, we have a pretty good performance based on some of the assessment reports that have been done on the countries in terms of broadband connectivity and things like that. We are pretty good. We have pretty good ratings here as well. Our basic literacy rate, we have pretty high figures in the high 90s. So our people are understanding of how to use the technology, and they have a pretty good grasp of what is involved. When we look at the legislative and regulatory environment, we also show some positive trends there as well. We have a number of pieces of legislation that was passed, some recently, some not so recently, but it all as well for us to build the base to move forward. One of the things I would want to speak about is the potential as well for our people in the private sector to do more and improve in terms of the trade of ICT products and services. And what we have observed is that there is a lot of potential in that space globally, as was mentioned earlier, the rise of digitally delivered services and cross-border trade has been growing exponentially fourfold over the years. And so there's a space for us there to do more in that area as well. When we look at our services trade right now, we see that much of it is focused on transportation and rough constituting about 21%. And when we look at sales, our exports and computer services and ICT services, we see in the range of 9 and 7%. So there is a lot of space there for us to grow. Moving on, how then do we grow that and take advantage of that potential? There are some challenges as we would want to address. So market access being one of the things that we focus on, and given our private sector that space to grow and penetrate markets. So we look at our trade agreement situation where we don't have much services trade agreements, but the ones that we do does give us access to a lot of the major markets around the world. So it's really now for us to focus our efforts to take advantage of that. There's also some supply side domestic things that we would need to do really to build capacity nationally, to bring our people up to speed, to give them the competitive edge that they need to grow and be able to make a presence and a sustained presence in the export markets. So we could talk about those things as well. Ministry of Trade in its part has been pursuing a number of efforts to help in that. One of the flagship projects we have been leading is the e-commerce strategy. We are about to embark on the development of a new one this year, so that that will help in the national trust to get us where we want to be. And then there are a couple other areas I think that we could probably focus on as a country, that certain interventions that we probably need to make, strategic interventions that could really even accelerate us more. So in looking at the legislative and regulatory sphere, there's some things we need to do there, as in terms of our education and training, and protections of IP and consumer activity online, as was alluded to by Mr. Cavendish. So those are some of the things that we are seeing, and things that we could talk about later on. But I'll stop here, Mr. Moderator, and hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Neville, and thanks for a good overview of what's been happening in the overall landscape of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm sure we're going to deep dive on the government's role as we go forward, both from the panel side as well as from the audience side. So keep the questions coming in. Colleagues, if you have questions, maybe you could begin posting them in the chat. They'll be recorded by the team who's behind the scenes here, and we'll try and get those questions out at the appropriate time, as well as perhaps maybe even during the discussion itself, where we can add flavor to what's been going on, depending on how the tone moves. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to move into what I would call the stakeholder groups beyond government. So government has said what their plans and what they're working on. But let's look at what's been going on in, let's say, the practitioners in doing the work. And I will actually let everyone know I will end with TTCSI, who will wrap up the sector discussion by an overarching view. So I'll first go to Camille Salvon-Abraham, who is from academia. She is at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and she has been involved in the animation industry for several years, as many of you know. And those who don't, she is, I'm not sure if you want to be considered the mother as yet of the sector, but I guess she's there, but she likes it or not. So Camille, over to you to give your insights. And of course, if you have anything to share, slides or so on, you can share your screen. Over to you.
Okay, so thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, because it's a very important platform. I would like, well, all protocols observed, of course. So my background is academia. So I'm the lead for animation at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, but I'm also the founding director of Anime Career Festival, which has been running for 22 years in the Caribbean, in Trinidad. So I'm going to talk today quickly about three areas. We will discuss some successes. We would look at key opportunities, and then we would look at the challenges. So I am talking from the perspective of the creative sector and its integration into IT and tech. Now, there are many successes. However, they're not necessarily in the public domain, right? Sometimes these successes are often unsupported by government and private sector, which is a reason why you won't see. And two, also, it's all online, it's all digital, it's intangible. So, obviously there's nothing to show on the shelf. But certainly there are some that I can point out. For instance, the University of Trinidad and Tobago and the entire intention of this university to embrace technology, to embrace new media has a lot of successes. So with the BFA in Digital Media Arts, there was a focus on animation, game development, and music technology. And that has been pretty successful. There's always an uptake. It is oversubscribed, and therefore it means that there's a need, and that need is being fulfilled. I do believe also the success of Anime Career Festival for running for 22 years, that in itself is a success. And if anybody knows, in order for a sector like game and animation to be successful, there's always a festival aligned to it. So in India, you have a festival. In the US, you have several festivals. In France, you have one of the main festivals. So it's not just about entertainment or about creating, a platform for people to just be in a space. It is integrally connected to the success of the industry. The other successes, I would say, are the development of studios in Trinidad. For instance, Full Circle is still functioning, doing outsourcing work. Coded Arts is functioning, doing outsourcing work when it comes to the game industry. And of course, freelancers. So what are the key opportunities? The key opportunities for us here in Trinidad and Tobago, if we are to really invest in this industry, is to build a cadre of 21st century graduates. And those graduates are needed to supply the demand for the future of work. So for example, I will give examples. The various applications that I'm speaking of are, for instance, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, etc. So Anime Career at the moment is working closely with an organization to see how gameplay could impact tourism and the creative sector. So the potential of this is amazing. However, the challenge is that you must have state buy-in in order for this to be successful, because private sector cannot do this on its own, all right? So the augmented reality experience can be used in the hotel industry, for instance, to provide attractive experiences to the customer. They could experience the room, they could go into the room, they could see the color of the room, they could see the size of the bed. I mean, that is something that is as close to being in the room as possible. Are we using this technology? No, we are not, right? Customers could use electronic devices to enhance those experiences. AI can help manage complex data and improve the performance of the systems. These technologies have the potential to significantly transform tourism industry and the creative industry to improve that experience, right? So for instance, another example, because I like to use examples, I like to use things that are happening. Recently, again, Anime Career was asked to, I was asked to look into how we can create a filter that will allow people to put on a carnival costume. So we successfully did it. We utilized the students, the graduates from the program, we utilized Tap Factory, and we were able to create a filter where people were able to put on this digital costume. I want to go back to the Tobago, to the experience with the company doing virtual reality for tourism. The idea with this gameplay is that the creation of a gameplay that will allow tourists or prospective tourists to play in a game where they can experience, for instance, part of the game to go to the next level is to get a brain coral from Speyside. If they get this brain coral from Speyside, they will get a digital token that will allow them to utilize it when they actually get into the country, and whether it's Tobago or Trinidad. Now, in order for this to work, you must have government buy-in, because you can't just do that, right? So private sector and public sector need to work together to really utilize the tools that are needed. The final example I want to give is Tap Factory. Tap Factory came under the University of Trinidad and Tobago. The IDB invested over $3 million for this project, and it basically is an outsourcing studio that allows students to actually be in the space and learn while they are doing. So far, they've employed over 30 young persons at some points, They all earning a salary while doing art. I need you to understand what that means. Often art and salary doesn't go together, but it's different because they are earning a salary while doing art. Gender parity, because of my own involvement in making sure that gender balance is there. There's 50% of those staff are female, 60% of supervisors are female, 75 to 80% of staff entered straight out of the university UTC program. 20% of staff are on the autistic spectrum. That is something that I can't go into detail now, but we're not taking and understanding the impact of that, because a lot of persons on the spectrum are not being employed. They can be employed. I have the data to show it, and I have the results to show. Over 4 local animated productions were done, and some are in the pipeline. International outsourcing is happening. Currently, it's earning foreign exchange, and this is something that I'm sure a lot of people don't know. Over 1 million TT in revenue was earned at the Tap Factory, right? So here's where we go into the challenges.
Camille, before we get to the challenges, I want to make sure we all have an opportunity to do the quick overview first. So we'll cover the challenges in the next round. Yeah. So
sure.
So let's head now to. Thanks very much for that. Actually, very good overview of the successes and the highlights of what has been achieved thus far. We can actually expand on that going forward. But I'm going to hand over now to Kendall Tull from Telios, who will also give his overview perspective, and maybe as well, begin highlighting, as well as Camille did, some of the successes that you've seen in the particular sector, which I believe will be considered to be software development. Kendall? And I think you're on mute. So.
Thank you, Tracy. All protocols observed. So I am currently working with Telios Systems. Telios Systems is a software development company. We've been in business for over 25 years. And we do not just work within Trinidad and Tobago, but also regionally. And we also have a subsidiary that is producing a solution for power cooperatives in the US. I think in terms of what is possible in terms of exporting services, I believe that there is a lot of potential there. The world is pretty much a global marketplace. There are many opportunities via, for example, the Microsoft marketplace, where applications can be developed and marketed globally. But there are some things that I think, lessons that we had to learn in terms of how to be able to attract and win opportunities on the global stage, particularly in the North America environment. And to some extent, those lessons also apply to Europe. First thing I would speak to is the need to understand the regulatory environment as it relates to data. And if you are doing software development for any solution in the US, if the company that you are attempting to do business with is a publicly traded company, questions regarding your certification and in areas like Sarbanes-Oxley, which speaks to IT controls, and HIPAA, for example, which speaks to the security of any health-related data, which is actually a fairly broad term, becomes paramount in order to be able to do business at that level. As an example, we would have been in conversation with a company. We showed them our platform, the solution that they were asking for as a POC, and they were very interested, but the stumbling block that we hit was that we weren't Sarbanes-Oxley or SOX certified, nor were we HIPAA certified. And to them, that made a difference between being able to deploy an application to their entire workforce of thousands of employees to a subsection that would be only at most 10% of the total workforce. So if you are looking to expand outside the region, understanding these things and understanding the need for these types of certification that is required is, I think, a critical requirement that we had to learn. As far as the other thing I think I would like to touch on is that there is need in the local finance sector to become a lot more risk accepting as it comes to supporting companies that produce IP. Far too often when we speak to financial institutions, they are only willing in supporting companies that have hard assets. You get asked to provide property as collateral, for example. So even though we have successful software platforms that earn revenue regionally and locally, there still is that challenge that you face whenever you're speaking to financial institutions in that regard. So I think that there's definitely a need in the finance sector in particular to understand and to support our thrust into looking towards software development and other IT-related services in the economy. Because to ask persons to have to provide personal guarantees, risk your property, etc., is a significant drawback as it currently pertains in the environment that we operate in here in Trinidad. So I believe there's boundless potential, but I do think that there are some things that need to be addressed, as I said, and those are the two that I would like to raise during the course of these discussions.
Thank you very much, Kendall, and thank you for sharing that that perspective. And of course, I do want, as we go ahead, for you to share some of the successes you've also had as well. So it'll be good to ensure that we understand what Telos has done and to give some impetus or some maybe some motivation to other companies in the sector to indicate what may have worked for Telos over the years, either regionally or internationally. So we'll touch on that shortly. So we've heard from, as I said, so we've had the government overview. We've had a high-level, wide perspective, the helicopter view. And we've had two practitioners in the sector, in digital services. So we've had talking about animation, which let's say is the orange economy type environment. It's a little, it's digital, but also creativity. And then we've had the let's say the pure digital economy, software development type discussion. All of these are what are known as services. The reason why I don't want to sound pedantic, but Trinidad and Tobago has a history of being heavily focused on goods, and much of its data and many of its policies have been very goods focused. So the services side of the economy has been growing, but the policies to deal with that have been, let's say, not as aggressive. Yeah, maybe that's the way I want to use. That is changing, and as Neville said, that's something that the Ministry of Trade is actively working on. But in the last maybe 20 years or so, we've seen the emergence of the TTCSI, which is a coalition of basically a chamber of services. I don't know what else to phrase it. So it's a business association of all the practitioners in the services sector. It's not just companies, it's actually associations, I believe, as well, of services providers, as well as the individual service companies. And Vashi can explain more on that. And what I'm going to ask Vashi to do is give a little, maybe a sense of the evolution of this thinking from Trinidad and Tobago moving towards a services-driven economy, and then of course focus or maybe zero in on the digital side and let's understand how TTCSI is playing a role there. So over to you, Vashti.
Sure. Thank you, Tracy. I have a presentation. So just kickstart in terms of who we are. I think it's important to put in terms of a contextual framework. The TTCSI is a network of sister coalitions within CARIFORUM states, and we were established as a result of a decision that was taken by the heads of government of CARICOM back in 2004. And why did they do that? Because whilst the region at that point in time was preparing to negotiate the economic partnership agreement with the European Union, and while there were very active and robust manufacturing associations, there were no single entity to negotiate on behalf of the services sector. Hence the reason why CSIs were established. I hope that you are seeing my screen. Tracy, are you all seeing my screen?
Yes, we are. I don't want to interrupt you. Yes, we are. Yes, you see my thumbs up.
Okay, because I am not seeing any. So let me just walk through the state of play. So given that we were established basically to create a cadre of services exporters, back in 2018, the TTCSI Board of Directors decided to revisit our mandate. And what was to assess what was preventing us from building a cadre of services exporters. And in doing that, we decided that we need to address some of the hard issues. And one, it's not just a Trinidad and Tobago issue, but indeed it's a global issue in terms of how do you measure the performance of services. So in doing that, we put forward a number of projects to address this issue, which led to the establishment of a National Services Exporters Portal. Now, I like to say that the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise for the services sector, because when I started here in 2018 and I approached our members about exporting their services, people connected exporting with producing a product. During the pandemic, most of these service providers, their side hustle became their primary economic activity. And then they realized how they can use the technology to sell their services globally. Now, in terms of support for this cadre of services exporters, we need to be honest. And in assessing the institutional framework, most of our institutions are geared towards supporting the manufacturing and energy sectors. So herein lies the opportunity for the TTCSI to strengthen its capacity to service the services sector, which is a diverse group. Hence the reason why we launched a national campaign called the Go Global TT Services campaign. I will get on into that, but basically this campaign looked at through the National Services Exporters Survey, which was introduced in 2019, we assessed what were the sectors, subsectors within services that had the highest export potential and concentrated our efforts on these sectors, and it's on the screen there. And the Go Global TT Services campaign comprised basically 4 core projects. Services Go Global, which concentrates on terms of building export capacity of service providers. Gateway to Trade, it's more rigorous. It takes firms that has the potential to export through a 9-month to 12-month program, and we actually just concluded about a year ago the first cohort of that and 23 firms, we were able to connect 23 firms to buyers. And we must be able to motivate and reward excellence. So the Caribbean Lawrence Placide Award was introduced in 2019. And the most important success story for the TTCSI, I have to say, has been the introduction of the National Services Exporters Portal. I have a short video to show you about what this portal does. But both Kendall and Camille talk about some of the challenges. And this here on your screen, again, gives you an idea of some of the challenges that must be addressed if we were to grow a cadre of services exporters. And marketing and finance continues to be one of the top core issues that we have been facing. And we have been attempting to address the marketing issue through the introduction of this National Services Exporters Portal. The issue that Kendall brought up in terms of the regulatory environment, we also early last year, again, based on intelligence from the portal, we polled those firms. There are roughly 515 firms on this portal across 14 subsectors. And we asked them, what are your priority markets? Did you try to export into those markets? What were the obstacles? And we built out and conceptualized a doing business with the World series. Again, so we have data. We are doing these a series of webinars over the course of 2 years, connecting these firms directly with key decision makers in each jurisdiction, providing these firms with market intelligence about the ins and outs of doing business in that particular country in terms of the regulatory framework. And all of this information is being made available free of charge. So I will now share the National Services Exporters Portal.
Looking for service providers? Data on business trends? Opportunities for exporting your service globally? Then join or access the National Services Exporters Portal of the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Services Industries. The NSEP Local Services Hub works to position, brand, market, and promote Trinidad and Tobago for our alliance of professional services associations and organizations. Members receive advice on international markets, help developing market entry strategies, participate in trade workshops, and review in-depth market reports. We encourage joint marketing efforts to help reduce export costs, promote e-commerce practices, the use of new digital media, and so much more. As a member of the public, you can have access to disaggregated services data, view prepared and customizable visualizations of services data, and access up-to-date statistics on the services sectors. Registered firms and associations can access business-to-business opportunities, export capacity building training, reports on penetrating international markets, and notifications on calls for proposals at home and abroad. So, don't wait. Go to nsep.ttcsi.org and register your service. Find your tribe and take your business globally with NSEP and TTCSI.
It was the early 1980s. The name
Thank you, Vashti. Would that be the end of your initial overview?
Or a brutal dictator. He was the CEO.
Vashti, would that be the end of your overview?
Yes, it is.
Yes, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vashti, and thank you for sharing the video as well. I think that's quite interesting to see that there is actually something happening in the digital sphere for digital services, which is good to see. I'm not sure how many people are actually aware of that, so it's good that we're promoting it today in our discussion. So let's now move to the what I would call the actual, the discussive format. We're going to get into some hard questions here, but it's building off what we just started with. So I know Camille had begun discussing the successes in the sector, but I want to ask, maybe let me put Neville up on the spot for a second here. So from the Ministry of Trade, and I know that you can't speak for all the government, the wide scope of government, the Digital Transformation Ministry notwithstanding. What have you seen as successes from the government's best perspective in this sector? So, and you talk about an e-commerce strategy that's being revised again. Have you seen any e-commerce initiatives being successful? Why is the strategy being revised? As an example, remember there were some IDB projects that the Ministry of Trade worked on. Actually, I was involved in one of them a few years ago. What successes have you seen from a digital perspective in Trinidad and Tobago in this area?
Thanks, Tracy. And in responding, it's important to understand that from our perspective, we look at it as the role of the state in the process is really in creating that enabling environment so that businesses can grow and do what they need to do. So for us, success would be in how we are able to do that. And when we look at some of the broad objectives that the government had for the digital space in terms of creating that enabling space, we look at the connectivity aspect of it and the infrastructure aspect of it. Those are one of the areas in which we wanted to make improvements in. And when we looked at the performance and some of the metrics and results that we have had from interventions in that area, I think the readiness assessment, the digital readiness assessment report that was recently completed in 2022 showed that in terms of our connectivity and infrastructure situation, we're somewhere right in the middle of where we would need to be between being basic and transformational at the two extreme ends. We were rated somewhere in the middle. I think systemic is the term that they use, meaning that we had strong indices in that space, in terms of the connectivity, access to broadband connection, which is important if you really want to do anything in the digital space. You need to be able to go online easily and have the bandwidth to do things. But yes, there are room for improvement. We want to move away from that middle tier of performance into transformational. So we have to work again on things like mobile broadband connectivity and improving that there, and in terms of the reach and scope to certain communities across rural areas and things like that. And in terms of reliability, is something as well that we want to improve on. And to help that, I know government and the ministry in particular had sought to try and help that space by encouraging investment in the area. And through the TTIGF Pact, for example, was one of approach to try and get investors to come in to help us develop that. When we look at what has been able to happen, we have not been able to get the kind of results that we want coming out of the TTIGF Pact. And so I know right now we are looking at reimagining, probably recasting what we're doing in that space. So that is work that we're ongoing in respect to the infrastructure. Now, in terms of literacy, as I alluded to earlier, what we realize is that people are familiar and comfortable using the internet. But when you do a deep dive into the figures, you see, a lot of people do it for surfing, emailing, and things like that. But what we really want is to more get people involved in production and software design and things like that, the business side of it. So the question we ask is, okay, are we doing what we need to do to get enough people in that space? And maybe there is room for improvement there. So I think Ms. Selvona alluded to it about getting the number of graduates that we want out of the university. So that is something we will be looking at, is how do we ensure that our tertiary level graduates are the right type of graduates that we need to feed our private sector business community to get the personnel and the skill sets that they need to do more. So we have to look at possibly improving and encouraging private sector partnership with academia to try and develop the curricula that is required to match the industry needs and have that discussion. So we doing what we need to do. In terms of the legislative and regulatory space, we are encouraged there. We think we're moving in the right path. Recently, a couple of legislations passed, the Computer Misuse Act, for example, the Electronic Transactions Act, the Data Protection Act. I think some parts of it were complete, so it's not fully there. And I think that is an area in which we would need to really accelerate the reform process, our legislative and regulatory reform, to get us at a more advanced stage, because our rating there as well is a mid one in that we're not bad and we're not quite transformational, but we're right in the middle. So what I think we need to do really is accelerate that reform process. And one of the things that would help us do that Mr. Tull alluded to in terms of the standards, help us address the standards, because a full proclamation of the Data Protection Act, for instance, one of the things it would allow us to do is to establish the data commissioner and allow that position to develop things such as standards for the industry, for both the public and private space. So I think what we really need to do is focus on completing that work in terms of the reforms that we need to get us where we're going. But we are in a good place, a better place. I think Mr. Cavendish had alluded to that we are ahead of the curve in that space. So I'm encouraged by that.
Thank you very much, Neville. That was excellent in terms of, I guess, giving a government view. I know you still haven't focused on the success stories in terms of any one sector, but I understand why you may not be able to do that from your position. So I'm going to rely on someone like Vashti to kind of give me some insight into that. I see Camille chomping at the bit to respond to some of your points, but Camille, I'm going to leave you for the last point because I'm going to move into challenges right after. Let's cover these opportunities, success stories first, and then I could hand over to you to continue your discussion about challenges. But I'm going to ask Vashti now to sort of respond to Neville's observations on the successes and opportunities, as well as some of the, I guess, what you might, I won't call it obstacles, but maybe areas for improvement. What have you seen from TTCSI's perspective, which is, I guess, a broader private sector, multi-stakeholder perspective of the successes and opportunities in the sector, the digital services sector, and sort of, echo what Neville is saying, but what's actually happening on the ground from where you sit, especially from a private sector perspective.
Sure. And what I want for persons to bear in mind is that there is a lot of development work that needs to be done in order to grow a cadre of exporters. So bear in mind what we have continued to do for manufacturing. We have not been able to translate that into services. So the CARICOM continues to be a priority market for manufacturers. And we have not been spending and deploying resources on services. So what I could talk about in terms of successes in a short time framework, if we were to assess, and we have documented this in terms of evaluating and assessing the successes of the firms under the Gateway to Trade Accelerator program. And so everything we do is documented, because a big part of growing a cadre of services exporters is inculcating a exporter's mindset. So hence the reason why this portal is important, because it's about creating a community of exporters so that people can share their learnings, their feelings as well. So out of Gateway to Trade 1.0, we have had all those 23 firms. We have been able to connect them to buyers. And when we talk about that, we are assessing how many contracts were won. So we have that data available. In terms of the issue with certification, that's another important area that we are addressing. What I term a non-trade barrier, because most of these firms, again, drawing from the firms that are on the portal, and I said it's roughly just under 520, they are coming to us and telling us that when we try to gain entry into a particular market, they are asking us for an ESG certificate. And this is something we are seen as a non-trade barrier. So we are hoping to address that because we are working with the IDB and Career to develop an ESG tracking mechanism for services providers.
Thanks, Vashti. So there is work being done. We'll get back to, I think, the regulatory aspect, which I think is going to be critical to this moving forward. Of course, we're going to discuss financing and all the other aspects that the IDB and others are doing shortly. So let me ask Kendall, as I was suggesting before, are there any areas of success opportunities that Telios has identified themselves, or maybe that they've seen in the market, operating as a long-standing player? Because as you know, software development in particular is sort of it's a strange field, right? Because there's so many areas you can branch off into. You can get very niche, or you can be very broad. India's captured the sort of blob, that blob market of software development, so to speak. You go to India, you pay $5 an hour or something like that, you get stuff done. That's very difficult to compete with. In terms of web development or basic filling a form or a small application. I know Telios has been doing not only applications, but they're actually building software to build applications, if you see what I'm saying. So they're actually building the frameworks. And that's what you're mentioning. You're trying to, I think, market to the organization you mentioned. So having said all of that, what success stories can you bring to the table, sort of motivate the sector forward that you've seen either as Telios or generally in the sector from what Trinidad and Tobago has been doing? Anything that you could share with us? And you're on mute. Don't forget you're on mute.
Sure. So in terms of Telios's business lines are one, communications. So for example, we have a platform that allows you to send text messages, WhatsApp, basically allowing companies to be able to communicate with their own customers. And we have seen quite some considerable success over the last few years regionally. And partly that has been fueled by the fact that we've been working with companies who themselves in the traditional fields have been expanding regionally. So it has forced us, for example, to look in terms of finding partners regionally to transport these messages, etc. And I think that there's a great deal of opportunity in that regard. We even do work with certain carriers in the region as well too. So I think as the world moves more towards providing online services, the communication needs to communicate with the customers itself grows in parallel. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And we have certainly seen a lot of growth in that area. I think right now, probably about 20% of our revenue comes from communication across the region and globally. On the software development and solutions development side, we have also seen opportunities there. I think probably a few of the significant successes that we have had have actually come from regional governments. We actually did a national health insurance system for a regional government. So it was national in scope. I think at its peak, it had close to 75,000 people active on the system in terms of users, which speaks to scope and scale. So I do think that there are a lot of opportunities there, and it's probably easier within the context of operating regionally in that software development space, because some of these barriers that exist in terms of the maturity of the regulatory environment don't exist there to the same extent. So I think the challenges that you have is the access to market. The challenge you have is being able to understand the needs of the customers and to be able to efficiently, effectively develop the solutions that they require. And I do think that there have been those two examples, I think, are two of the, I think, most notable successes that I could point to that we as a company have been able to achieve going forward. The rollout, I would have alluded when I spoke earlier about our subsidiary company that has a product called PowerWorks that is marketed to power cooperatives in the US. That has been slower to grow, partly for some of the reasons that I would have just mentioned previously. So, but there is opportunity there, but it does require significant investment. So understanding, for example, the power co-op market required travel, required attending conferences, etc., to meet and to provide. I believe Vashti sort of pointed to that in her presentation when she talked about the high cost of travel, etc. But there are absolutely opportunities that I think very much are out there, and I believe that the solutions that I just mentioned do point the way to the levels of success that you could have, and in these instances, these are multi-million-dollar opportunities that we're referring to.
That's Kendall. So in a nutshell, I think this is an important distinction. So I had mentioned previously the blob of software development and that $5 an hour market that somehow we're trying to compete in. But you are saying that effectively that may not be the way that we have to focus our energies on. We talk about platform development, bespoke opportunities in regional government sectors and so on, that we will be able to compete more effectively and not have to worry about the wider sector of development communities in these countries where the costs are so low, and they were able to go and buy something for $100 and get an application done. So that's something that I think is very important for us to understand, because as a potential entrepreneur, and you're trying to go out there and do something, you have to understand what your demand is. As I said, what the market analysis has to be. You can't just say, look, I'm a great developer, I have some good guys or girls with me, let's go and do something, without doing any analysis at all of what the market looks like. You're not going to survive. And even if you get a job, you're lucky to get your Fiverr, you get a job here and there, you may not be able to scale beyond that, and you're struggling. And you don't know why, because you haven't assessed the market properly. Having said that, and I'm going to now toss to Camille, who has this experience, I think at a significant level, especially in a particular industry, like a specific industry within that space, having done work with international, outsourcing organizations, and has success. So now you've addressed some of these successes, and feel free to add a few more. But maybe now, as I said, we could move into the challenges discussion a little deeper. Like, what having done this work and having had successes, you've seen companies come, they go. Some companies have started up and are struggling still. Some are doing better than others. What makes a successful entrepreneur or entrepreneurial organization emerge in the sector, especially in animation in your case, but maybe generally? What are the benchmarks you see? And if that's the case, what challenges do you see within our country, our economy, that prevents that from being sort of a global thing that can happen? We know here's a blueprint for success, and let's just go. Why is it so sporadic?
Yeah, so great question, Tracy. So first of all, my eagerness to speak is simply because I have about 300 students that pass through me. This is a $300 billion industry. Gaming is probably double that. And I want for our young people to be able to be part of that. So that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. Now, a young industry, a new industry like gaming, animation, and digital media need the kind of support similar to what, for instance, when we discovered oil, right? When we discovered oil, it wasn't put upon the people in Trinidad and Tobago to invest in rigs. No, we handheld that industry because we saw the need for it, one, and we saw the dollars, right? So we said, right, we will handhold that industry for about 5-10 years, and we're still handholding it to a certain extent. Digital media, animation, gaming needs that. We've never been able to actually be handheld. It was sort of sporadic investment in the industry. It was never done in a real way that will allow the industry to grow and give them space to do that. There is, however, I am aware that there's a massive amount of funding being made to Trinidad and Tobago. There needs to be a substantial portion of that invested in capacity development. That is really, really important. Now, I heard Mr. Alexander speak, and I was it was so refreshing to hear what you're saying. And I think the ability to rethink what we do with these tech parks is really important because there is so much potential there. But if we do not take on and understand what the challenges are, we'll just, as Tracy said, we'll keep repeating the same thing. So one of the main things for me is the access to industry-specific training. I am from academia, I am from the university, but the university training does not do that. What the university training does is 4 years, and you come out specialized and you come out with a degree. We need quick training. We need to pivot quickly. We need, there's a cost to that, most people probably would not be able to do. So how do we give access to that training? We are still, another challenge is the bandwidth. We're still sort of dealing with that a little bit. Especially like, for instance, even in the tech parks, we are a little bit away from things. That's still an issue, but I know that could be resolved. Now, there's one particular challenge I want to talk about that will be a little bit unpopular, but I understand why these policy actions were taken, and that is to do with the new Procurement Act. Now, I totally get it. I totally understand why it's there, and it's important that it is there. But there are certain nuances in this industry that will not survive with those policies, right? We exist in a gig economy, and those who don't know what the gig economy is, basically people are now working in short term. They are now working 3 months contract, 6 months contract, totally different to what it was. This means that if we are to go through everything that is to happen with those new procurement laws, projects are going to halt. Projects are going to stop midway because you need to ramp up quickly. You need to hire people quickly because that is how this industry is. It is exponential. Now, this also has a negative trickle effect. So, for instance, because of the gig economy, persons who are being employed cannot open a bank account because they have a 3-month contract. So how do you pay these people? So there's so many things that are affiliated. I want to end by saying the main challenge, Tracy, that this industry has is our inability to scale up. That is our main challenge. And there are layers and layers to this that if we start, I won't be able to finish. But certainly that is our main challenge. But I am an optimist, and I do feel that we will find a solution. But we really have to, like Mr. Alexander said, you have to put your ears on the ground and hear it from the ground up, because sometimes it's these simple information that will make it, make it work.
That's an extraordinarily important point you just raised at the end there, Camille. I was just having a discussion with a colleague just yesterday, someone doing research in this area, and we were discussing that we've evolved sort of a startup culture, which is great, but not a scale-up culture. So we start things all the time. I don't know if it's a hackathon culture. I don't know what has happened, but all these hackathons and stuff has started up this sort of, let's do something, let's get it done, and then it all crashes at the end of it all, and we're back to square one. And I think that culture, as you quite rightly said, is problematic, because entrepreneurs the culture of our environment is not one of fail fast, fail often, fail fast. It's, we're trying to be successful from the start. So once you are starting up and you fail, you're discouraged, and then, financing is not available to do the whole thing. Again, that's a whole different discussion. Maybe not for this forum, but you're absolutely right. We are not a scale-up culture, and all the challenges you've mentioned, I think they are something that they're solvable. They're not solvable, and it's important for us to understand that, so that we're not, here today talking about, and we're going to address that in the forum as well. We're not just here talking about all, have a victim complex, that we can't do things. As both you and Kendall have just said, there are successes. In fact, in some cases, there are good successes that we can build on, but we seem to be, doing a 2 steps forward, 3 steps back kind of thing in many cases. There's some political stuff involved in this that we need to be careful about. And we need to ensure that there's sort of a plan that can survive politics, survive the government strategic plan type cycle, so that when something is going on, it doesn't stop and have to restart every time something else in the political sphere happens. I want to make sure we understand that is a challenge as well. I see Neville has his hand raised, and I'm going to ask, now that you have your hand raised, Neville, I want to ensure that you are going to also add some challenges to the discussion, now that we have you on the floor. Neville.
Yes, thanks, Tracy. And yes, I could segue into the challenges, but I just wanted to react to the point of the continuity of policy and strategies, which is very, very important in making progress over the years, and that we need to be consistent. And what I would want to do is make a call to the stakeholders involved that when we are developing as a state, when we are developing different policies or so relevant to your particular area, that you make yourselves involved and make yourselves heard in that process. In the past, one of the challenges we have had is that when we reach out to stakeholders for consultations in our policy development process and strategy development process, admittedly, it's not the most exciting thing, it's not the most, but when we do reach out, sometimes we don't get the type of feedback that we need to really ensure that your voice, your position is incorporated into the national objective. So I really want to encourage persons, stakeholders, to really speak to your BSO, your relevant BSO, if it's in this case the TTCSI, who we rely on as a key stakeholder to represent the voices of many in the services sector. Reach out to them, get involved, get your position, so because that's the only way we are able to really effect and design policies that impact in real terms on what you do. So I just wanted to say that. Now, in terms of challenges, let me say, let's start by just looking at where we are. And I'm biased because I'm looking at it from a trade perspective again. Right? So when we look at services trade at the export, what is the picture telling us? So we, Trinidad and Tobago, we export about $1 billion or so odd in services, US, $1 billion or so US in services yearly, which accounts for 10% of our total exports, meaning that we export more goods than we do services. So that's in itself is something we want to address. So we export about $1 billion and we import about twice that on average. So we have a trade deficit there, so it's imbalance. And then when you look at what type of services do we export, when you look at our communications, computer services, and IT services, it's minuscule. It's in 9 for communications, computer services, which includes software design and things like that. It's about 9% of our total services export. IT services is about 7-8%. And we're looking at, this is around like 100 million, 80, 90 million a year that we do. So clearly there is opportunities there. But then we look again, if we took a deeper look again at the comparative advantage in the export of these services, the data shows that in terms of computer and information services and communication services, we do not have a comparative advantage in those areas. And when I say comparative advantage, meaning in terms of the percentage of our exports of those products, our total exports compared to the rest of the world's exports of those compared to the global export. So we don't. When we look further, we look at the trade competitiveness of those products as well. We see that in terms of telecommunications, computer and information services, we missed a lot of opportunities to capitalize on the global trends. And trade complementarity and competitiveness, that just looks at what we manufacture and export compared to what other countries are importing and how those, if they're increasing imports of those products. And so it looks at that comparison. And when we look at the data, we really miss out a lot of opportunities there because we weren't able to export more when the import of those products are rising in our trade balance. So what this tells us is that there's a lot of work to be done. And so we ask the question, why have we been realizing these types of results? And that brings us to the challenges. So we can look at it in 2 ways, 2 categories. We have some of the supply side issues, and then we have the demand side issues. And a lot of the issues that we're facing in the sector is supply side, meaning internal. There's things that we need to do ourselves. So we spoke about the infrastructure and again, the connectivity. While we do have good performance, there's still more for improvement with broadband and the reliability of the service, right? And so it was heartening to hear that Mr. Cavendish mentioned the new undersea cable and it coming to us in the region that would greatly impact on connectivity. I think we have about 5 or 6 undersea cables, so having another one would be great. So that is something, that's a space in where while we're doing good, we're not doing really good to really get want to attract investment and investors who are coming from a place where they are accustomed to really blazing speed internet access and reliable too, which is critical, it's reliable to where it's spotty. So we need to fix that. Another issue, and I alluded to it before, is the people and the skill sets. Do we have among the critical mass of people trained with the right skill sets for what we need to do? When we talk to the business community, they said, well, we have a lot of computer literate people, but we don't quite have the people that we need for the business side of things, right? So that's an area that has hampered our competitiveness to really pivot and turn around and do things and scale up at the pace we need, because we just can't find the people. And if you had to bring in people at a cost and things like that, that's a challenge. The trade finance for services companies, including ICT-related companies, is another big one. It's undeniable, and it's something that services exporters and businessmen face all the time. And it's something that preoccupies the attention of the ministry in terms of how do we get our financial institutions to really support startups and other business MSMEs in the services space. We had discussion about utilizing soft assets to secure loans. So things like your IP, inventory, and things like that to try and help use as collateral to get people loans. So that is something that we have been looking at as well. The data is another issue that has hindered us a bit. Services is notorious for being difficult to get data because of the nature of services. So a consultant and expert now could go and get a contract in Europe, and he doesn't have to report anything to anybody. We are unable to track that transaction. You could do things online, right? So we don't know what's happening, and solving that is a priority as well. Vashi would have spoken to the ministry. We have been working with TTCSI as well as the CSO and Central Bank to improve our data collection in the services space to try and get the information we need to really design and develop more impactful policy positions. The surveys, the National Exporter Survey that TTCSI does, we work closely with Vashi to try and capture the performance in certain sectors and try to flesh out and improve that product, and that's the sophistication of it. We recently had a discussion with the Central Bank to try and give us more disaggregated data and to move away from the traditional data sets that they capture to give us more granular pieces of information so we can target certain specific subsectors rather than just a big category at higher levels. The legislation and regulatory situation, again, is a space that continuously needs to be improved upon and at a quicker pace. I mean, we know the situation in terms of our legislation reform and the pace that takes, but we need, when you're talking technology, the pace is blazing speed. So we need to be able to move quicker there. But we have, fortunately, we have taken action in the government, that is, in terms of certain pieces of legislation. As I said, there is the Data Protection Act and Electronics Transaction Acts that we need to continue that reform there and continue the work there. That would unlock us to do a lot more things, that some of the things that we're speaking about, to help us start to address it. So we need to kind of encourage those responsible to kind of take up the pace in that area. So that's the supply side. On the demand side, which is now, okay, getting to market, getting into the specific markets that you, right, from trade perspective, one of the things we try to do to help companies get to market is negotiate trade agreements that will give them preferential access. We have a number of trade agreements, but only 2 of them, we have services chapters or services agreements that would give brands certain access to our services companies. We have a number of built-in agendas for that, and there's several reasons why that is so. Because we are part of a regional process as well. So there are reasons why our agreements don't have services chapters. But recognizing that, we have taken the approach from a broad policy perspective to do more in terms of services. One of the things that we're looking at is reigniting the discussion on services chapters in some of our existing trade agreements. So we started a discussion regionally to go and proceed with Colombia, for example. The other approach is to, for those two agreements where we have a services chapter, is to seek to aggressively take advantage of the opportunities therein. Interestingly, the EU agreement that we have, the CARICOM EU EPA agreement that we have, is one of those where we have a services agreement with. And the EU is a huge market, extremely large market. But we have been faced with a number of issues to really take advantage of. One of the big issues is the movement of our persons, our services professionals in and out of Europe. We have the Schengen arrangement, but we have seen some challenges and limitations with that Schengen arrangement. It will give you about 90-day stays or 180-day stay, right? So we want to improve on that and take advantage of some of the other opportunities that the EPA agreement has. So that is one aspect of it. The other issue is that because of where we are in terms of the development of the services sector, seeking to engage in certain agreements with these other countries is like a David and Goliath battle, because when you have an agreement, is you giving me access, I giving you access, and these companies are so way advanced. And so we have to be mindful that we need to leave enough policy space for our sector to develop and grow before we can unleash them to the competition, to everybody. So there's a delicate balance here, because there may be some that can and wants to go ahead, but there are others that need a little more time to get to that stage. So it's a delicate balance when how do we engage our trading partners with these types of agreements going forward. And then you have the regional issue as well to deal with. So there's a lot more that can be said about some of the issues that have us where we are and the performance that we have seen so far. And so there are things that could be done, and I think I guess we will talk about those a little more, but I'll stop here because I see others asking for the show.
Right. Thank you very much, Neville. That was actually very helpful, I'm sure, for everyone, not just us on the panel, to understand where we are sitting in the overall space. Now, we have 15 minutes left in this discussion. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically explain how we're going to move forward with the rest of the time. So Vashti had asked to speak, to respond. I see Kendall wants to respond. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to go to the questions that are in the chat. I'm going to ask colleagues who are willing to raise those questions verbally. It's easier and faster that way, I think, to raise their hand in the chat. So folks like, I see S.G. Rodney Taylor, I see Nigel Casimir, I see Dwight Nelson. If you wish to raise your hand and ask those questions, please do so now. Otherwise, I'm going to ask colleagues on the panel to respond to the questions in the chat so that we don't have any lost time, so to speak, by me rereading these questions. And then for all panelists, I'm going to come back to you at the end with the question about what can we do, exactly what Neville just mentioned. So I'm going to ask all panelists to respond to the question of, what exactly, let's stop talking, what can we do? And I'm going to use I sent you all these links about, we suddenly have over $1 billion of money flooding into digital transformation and digital services, whatever, from the IDB and the Latin American CAF, the Bank for Finance. I can't remember what it's translated into. That's coming into the country. So we'll wrap up with that response to that. What can we do now that we have so much money flooding into the economy now and in the future? What are like two things we can do, actions we can take, and we'll wrap the session up with that. So let's now take Vashti's observation, and then Kendall's, and remember the time is short, so please keep it brief. Thanks.
Sure. So I will be brief. Two things. One, I want to compliment Camille. Camille, I share an office. We share a space with Coded Arts. And whatever you are doing with your students, their attitude and temperament is excellent. I have not met anybody when they come into the compound, they would hail me out, always a pleasant good morning. So you are actually creating a cadre of globally competitive services exporters. Continue to do what you are doing. Secondly, in terms of the data issue, TTCSI has been successful in terms of whatever we do with surveys. We have a very high participation rate. And we have been doing a number of presentations with state agencies because we need to rethink the traditional mode of collecting data will not work. How have we been able to get these high levels of participation? Simply because our surveys are short. Our surveys are digital. You can do a survey on your smartphone. We need to rethink state agencies. Let us work together with CSO. CSO has one person who looks after collect data and analyze data for services. So in going forward, we need to streamline. If TTCSI have a core competency with respect to data, give us the resources to work with the central bank, CSO, to ensure that we have the proper data mechanisms in place. There's also, we put forward a number of projects because there are sectors that we are not tracking that has the capacity to be foreign exchange earners for the country. One is sports and recreational services. The cultural and creative sector industries, we have not been able to tap into the full value chain. So if that is an obstacle, streamline and let TTCSI work with the relevant state agency to get it done. Because I cannot stress how urgent it is. It is very important that we get the right data that will inform policy.
I tend to be completely selfish. Don't forget, we are discussing digital services in this session. So I want to make a special plug for that over and above the other services industries at
No,
this
but there's
session.
digital element to all of everything that we do now.
Obviously, but in terms of sale of services, we have to keep that focus, otherwise we would lose the focus. So I understand what you're saying about the enabler, but there's also that aspect of it being a sector and it's in and of itself that which is why it's confusing to some people. We have to make that very clear that it is a sector in and of itself. And I think that's important to understand all the time. Kendall?
Yeah, so we've touched on creating a cadre of individuals who are trained. I believe Neville just sort of alluded to it just now. Camille spoke earlier about the need to have training outside of the university and those traditional things because of the pace at which technology develops. But there's an inherent challenge that we are facing that I think we should acknowledge as well too. So we at Telios, we develop a lot of our people internally. We tend to hire younger people coming out of universities, etc. We invest in training them, etc. What I've seen over the last few months is that we've lost a number of people who have now moved to work with international firms. So they are working from home. They're being paid way above the pay scale here in Trinidad. And we have lost, a number of very talented people in that regard. And I think that to the extent that the employment is a global marketplace, we need to acknowledge that there is a challenge inherent in that we could stand to lose access to some of our best and brightest as a consequence of that. So just to say that in itself is a challenge that we face that we need to be mindful of.
There's a certain inevitability about that, actually, because if you can't get the work and the resources that you need to sustain your business in the traditional sense, used to local companies, then you look outside, and if you get it there, well, there we go. let's hope the revenue still comes into the economy in some way in Trinidad and Tobago and doesn't stay outside, which is the other problem, not for this particular session. All right, so I see our first hand. Sorry, I went mute. Nigel Casimir, your hand is raised. Please feel free to ask a question.
Thank you very much, Tracy. My congratulations to the TTIGF and the panelists for this very interesting, informative session. I had put a question in the chat, and Camille did address the challenge of scaling. I just wanted to address a particular point in the question and pose it, which was, if scaling is a challenge, do you see it as something feasible for us? Right? Is it a surmountable challenge, and are there emerging technologies that might help to alleviate or eliminate that challenge in the future? Thank you. Oh, I'm Nigel Casimir from CTU. Thank you.
All right, and before Camille takes that question, I see Rodney has a hand up. Let's take those questions. Rodney.
Thank you, Tracy. I'll stay off camera for now, but thanks for the opportunity. Very good discussion so far. And I did post the questions in the chat. They were addressed to some extent, but it was around monetization of online content. There are a lot of content producers in Trinidad in particular, and in bigger markets like Jamaica. And I'm aware of some of the challenges with monetization, despite the content that's being produced. And I wanted to know specifically what was being done, and if there's any sort of outreach to the other Caribbean states as well, so that we can approach these big tech companies together. And then with respect to the Developers Hub that is hosted by the Ministry of Digital Transformation, you pointed out the multi-million-dollar loans from CAF and IDB, and I posted some links to those loans there. Is there any policy for MDT or the government of Trinidad with respect to support for local entrepreneurs in these projects? So maybe a set aside for local businesses, local entrepreneurs, because we know oftentimes these very large projects like digital identities and online platforms are provided by external providers. So how are you working with MDT and others? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And I guess I want to ask if anyone has any other questions that are in the chat have not been answered, if panelists can respond in the chat. So the way I'm going to do, we have 5 minutes left. I'm going to be respectful of time. So I'm going to ask Camille to begin by responding and also wrapping up with sort of two action items that we can take forward.
Sure.
And can you respond to the second question as well, or would that be someone else? But the loans...
someone else, because I didn't, yeah.
All right. Maybe I could ask Neville to then take that question, or to Ashley, but also give your two points in wrapping up, and Kendall, of course, prepare your 2 points in wrapping up as we go forward. So Camille, you begin and answer, and then your 2 points to wrap up.
Okay, so very good question. It is feasible. It is feasible. It is doable. But the challenge is not the technology. The challenge is nothing to do with that. The challenge is process. The challenge is bureaucracy. The challenge has nothing to do with the ability of the young people to do what they need to do to learn, right? So it is feasible. We have to understand that if for instance, a funded project falls under a government agency, right? Which happened, and I've experienced. If the process is there slow for persons to ramp up, it's going to take a long time, or it never will happen, right? So it's not the technology. So I'm an optimist, and I think it can be done. I'd like to close, because Tracy, I will close with a statement that the digital ecosystem is fast-paced. We know that. It's exponential. It's nuanced. It does not fit the archaic system, which feeds into what I expressed there to Mr. Casimir. Decisions need to make quickly. People need to be hired. The workforce is young, and this is another thing. We don't really get that. The workforce is young. Their sleep pattern is different. I know this because, 300 students went through me. Their sleep pattern is different. Their communication and social skills are different. Their attention span is different. What do we do with that if they are our workforce? So I believe that the future can be amazing, but we need to sometimes I feel like we need to get out of our own way, right? We also need to look at policies that understand the nuances of this industry and be mindful that this generation cannot function in our archaic system. So we have to kind of make space for them. I'd end there, Tracy.
Thank you very much for those points, Camille. So Vashti or Neville, would you want to take SG Rodney Taylor's question about the loan funds and how we can deal with that in terms of what he was asking in the specific areas of using them for these items, or is that something that you could address, Vashti or Neville?
Well, what I can say is, I'll be more comfortable for the National Digital Transformation to respond to like specific plans or initiatives for the sector. What I can say is, at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, we are embarking on the development of a new national trade strategy. And what that would do would address more of the cross-sectoral issues that the sector faces. So while it may not be solely or directly specific to the ICT or the digital space, but it would address some of the broader issues that many of the services sectors deal with. So trade finance, things like that. But I would really prefer that others more closer to it speak to exactly what is being envisaged going forward.
Understood. And your final 2 points, or is that you've wrapped up with that?
Well, what I can close with, because I would have touched on some of it before in terms of where some of the interventions or that we may need to move us ahead is one. I think we really need to continue to accelerate that legislative and regulatory reform process that we have started. I think it's important that we see it through so that we can continue to advance on that. We need to continue to develop and flesh out the enabling environment and the ecosystem for digital trade so that at all levels and aspects of the spectrum, we are able to give our private sector people the space and the path that they need to grow and develop. The education point, to re-emphasize again that we really need to have that partnership with the private sector and in the industry with our education, tertiary institutions to develop the skill sets that we need with our people. We also probably need to look at the labor market policies again and areas of how we can upskill the people that we have, try to train, provide training and so on to really get and add to the pool of resources and people that we need. Continue to provide some support to our people, like the tell you, in terms of export capacity below that. And one of the things you're also looking at is really how to better utilize our diaspora, our experts, some of them who were here probably and left, and in other spaces, how we could still capitalize on them, although they may not be here, but to help us improve our situation here, let us build on what they have learned and the experiences they have gained. So, and finally, just to encourage stakeholders again to get involved in the policy process, because certainly at Trade, we have a very comprehensive process in that we do take inputs from private sector stakeholders, academia, civil society, and we need participants to get involved and get their word.
Thank you very much, Neville. Vashti, your final two action items that we can take forward.
To address the issue with loans, what I would like to see is that if you examine the country strategy reports from the IDB, and indeed the Global Competitiveness Report ranking for Trinidad and Tobago for the last 2 decades, you will see the core pillar that has as an impediment is the institutional pillar. So to echo the sentiments of Camille, who as a practitioner, we need to address the institutional framework and institutional strengthening if we were to go forward to drive services. And we need to have more agile mechanisms in place. And secondly, I know people say that once you hear Vashti, you hear data. Again, we need to address the issue of data collection. I cannot overemphasize that, because that is going to, once we have that data, we could be able to assess and evaluate the key performance indicators. We know what strategies to put in place, and we could also tell the story that here's what X percentage is contributing to GDP. We can double exports in ICT by 2028. We need to get our data portfolio going.
Thank you very much. Excellent points as well, Vashti. And Kendall, you have the last word. Your 2 actionable items we can take forward, especially given the incoming flood of money that is being given to being borrowed by the government to deal with the sector. You're on mute again, Kendall. You're on mute.
So the 2 points I would raise, I would just want to echo what Vashti was just referring to in terms of data, etc. But to add that we have to find mechanisms to gather that data and make it available to people who are looking to export their services, so that they understand the regulatory framework and the things that they are going to encounter in the markets that they are trying to penetrate. I'm not aware that there's any program that is actually specifically looking at those things. So when you actually go out into the market, you encounter them, and then you yourself have to determine how you're going to respond. With regard to, and this is specifically referring to the things that I would have mentioned in terms of the legislative framework as it relates to data protection and privacy and those other things that are critical when you're talking to external companies about software development specifically. And in regard to the flood of funding coming in via these on the digital transformation side, I'm sorry to say that we have seen personally that there's when those funds are being spent on the largest level, a lot of times it is spent on foreign software to actually execute on those things. I think the developer hub is a good step in the direction towards changing that, but we need to do more in terms of supporting our local software development industry and making more opportunities available locally, so that to provide that kind of sustainable, consistent income that you spoke about that is necessary to be the springboard for them to grow internationally.
Thank you very much, Kendall. And I see a comment in the chat from my colleague Julie talking about building a center of excellence. I just let everyone know that that was a project that was already implemented in terms of a report and a recommendation to do one in Trinidad and Tobago that's sitting on a shelf somewhere that needs to be taken up by some organization to move forward. It was done by Cambridge, the University of Cambridge Policy Links, and funded by the IDB, but it seems to have gone into abeyance. So let's not waste the work that was spent, both human and financial resources, on projects that were implemented to fix the sector and to drive forward. Let's get that work going. So that's my 2 cents to add to this. Let's ensure we don't restart the car engine every time. I mean, we don't have to reboot everything. Stuff that was done before is valuable. Let's take it forward. So thanks very much for your participation, colleagues. This was excellent, really informative. And I think when we really look at the recording, it'll have even more resonance to everyone going forward. So I really appreciate your time, your energy, and your passion for the topic. And hopefully we will meet again another time to have this discussion And the next time we talk about it, we talk about success primarily, and not so much the challenges. Thanks again, and I will now rehand the moderation to the next speaker, or I believe there's a break coming up, so I'll be guided by the overall agenda. Thanks again, and do have enjoy the rest of your day for those who are leaving us. Bye.
Unmuted there. Unmute myself, yes. All right, Tracy, that was a wonderful job with your panel. I think it went really, really well. I was really pleased with the level of participation, not just by the panel, but also by our audience. And thanks very much, everyone who contributed to that first session. Our second session for today is going to be moderated by, and before I get to the moderator, let me just bring that topic up here in view. Oh, when you're looking at so many screens there, it could be pretty confusing. All right, so we are on to training for digital transformation. And we realize that in that first panel, there are a lot of things that are happening and should be happening. And our host today is none other than the chair-elect of the TTMAG, Jacqueline Morris. I think she needs no further introduction, but she is a director and a very experienced person at IGF. So Jacqueline, good morning, and you take it away. The floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the panel. Oops. I'm a little discombobulated because the electricity just went and I had to try to move. So first I'd like to introduce our panel.
That's a TV.
Sorry? Oh, right. Let me find the... I just have too many tabs open right now. Okay, so this panel is about digital transformation for and the training that we need in order to move our population from where they are to where we want them to be post-transformation. Digital transformation, as we know, is being undertaken in countries all over the world to improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and ability to compete. In Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean, most of the population is not yet digitally literate to the extent needed for us to make that transformation. So what do we need? What are the challenges and what are possible solutions to those challenges that will allow us to train and educate this very large, very disparate population in the digital technologies that they will need to know in order to fully take care of the transformation that we need. So our panelists today are Lorcan Camps, and he is a visionary tech entrepreneur whose 30-year odyssey spans the high-tech environment of Los Angeles and Silicon Valley to the vibrant shores of the Caribbean. He's about not just technology, but transforming vision into tangible cutting-edge realities for businesses. He serves as the chairman of the Digital Business Technology Committee of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. He's done 5 startups, both in California and the Caribbean, and he works with groundbreaking tech solutions, and he has amazing market acumen. So please welcome Ken.
Thank you. Hi, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. Hello, panelists. Hi.
Next, we have Kieran Elliott from IGF. He is an accomplished software development professional with a passion for implementing transformational digital solutions for the public sector. He's the team lead of software development at IGF, and he has spearheaded impactful technology innovations, including Trinidad and Tobago's first government omni-channel live chat and chatbot system, TTIGF chat, and he led the government's first hackathon, HackTT. So these initiatives are initiatives that have empowered public agencies, streamlined IT delivery, and improved citizen engagement. So this is definitely something that Kieran knows a lot about and will be able to help us move the conversation forward. Welcome, Kieran.
Hi, good day. Good day, everyone.
And we have Carlton Samuels from Jamaica. And Carlton has been working, is an international consultant with an extensive body of work in areas of strategy, policy, process, innovation, and governance with a focus on ICT for development, technology and education, and privacy. He is also very active in telecommunications policy and regulation, as well as internet policy. And Carlton and I would like to have talking to us about what's going on in the rest of the Caribbean, especially Jamaica. Okay, so let's get started. So first, I would like anyone to give us a quick overview of what do you think of the DT project that we're doing here in Trinidad or Jamaica. What does it aim, what do these digital transformation projects aim to do, and what are certain of the things that you see as problems that we have?
I could talk about some of the work that we've been doing. Sure. So on the positive side, we've seen some of our clients who I would consider early adopters in terms of mindset. So I'll give an example of a project that we just went through. And it was initially the client came to us. They already had a website with all their products listed on it with e-commerce. And they also had internal systems. But what they wanted to do was to link them all up so that they could have just be able to offer a better service. And that's what they initially came to us on. What we did was internally, we revamped their whole internal system, digitalized it internally, and then launched their website after. I'm making that point because you need to they digitalize internally and went through some teething problems. probably over a period of a year before we went and launched the e-commerce side. And then they onboarded, first of all, a few clients, their top clients, first of all, by hand. They didn't just launch it and ask for people to come and try it out. They actually went through calls with them and showed them the site and how to use it. And it's been a tremendous success. I just got a text message 2 days ago from the managing director saying, Lokan, I'm so pleased we just crossed our $1 million in sales today. And we're really excited for the future. And some of the things that they want to do in the future is to basically kind of like what Amazon has done a while back, make their platform available for their providers, because their providers are coming and saying, hey, you got this really good platform. Can we come and list on you and sell on you? And so that's the next stage. So originally, so in this kind of example I'm giving, originally they wanted to just launch, revamp their systems and launch. But now they've done that. They're seeing that that e-commerce channel is significant, one, and two, that they can actually expand their inventory without even having to buy, by having these sellers on them. So it's like a new business model that they didn't actually envisage in the beginning that has now opened up to them as a result of the project that we did. And so, there's something of a transformation happening now in the market because of that. So I thought I'd share that as a positive one.
Great. But I have a question. When you talked about them starting, they picked clients and then they handpicked a group and then they started training them. And then after that positive reaction, other people started coming on board. So it's been like a cascading effect.
Yeah.
And would you say that that's a good way of implementing things?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I'd like to say on this panel to everyone is about, because we're talking about training for digital transformation, but just talking about digital transformation in of itself. We all know, or everyone should be familiar with the technology adoption curve. It's a bell curve, right? The way that the way that markets and people and companies and industries adopt technology is through this thing called the technology adoption curve. It's well known and it's a bell curve. Mm-hmm. And so at the very start of the curve, you've got the thin end of the curve, which is the early adopters. And then the large part is the majority. And then you have the laggards at the end. And this is a well-known way that technology, it's actually called the technology diffusion curve or adoption curve, depends on which way you're looking at it. And so a really smart way, to do transformation and to do training and anything to do with technology is to consider that curve. So what you do is you go for the early adopters, because what happens is it's almost like a social thing. People don't make the move. The majority won't actually do anything until they see enough of the early adopters doing it. And it's not like people are sitting there waiting to look. It's not like that. It's just more like it's just the way the technology is adopted. So start with the early adopters and create the case studies. Another way is because it happens to, I find when we're training, even in business environments, we would pick the core team and make sure that they're really, really well trained and comfortable. We spend a lot of time with them because then they become the champions out in the rest of the organization. And if they're weak, then there's no chance that anyone is going to do anything. So, it's a good way to look at it.
But with a national digital transformation, for example, you can't leave anyone behind. So we can't just say, okay, early adopters, we've transformed, say, our passport system. We go online, we fill out the form, and it's all done digital. If that's it, as an example. But what happens to the people who aren't early adopters? So we're going to have to run parallel systems for a while. But Carlton, can you talk to us about that? Because you've gone through that in Jamaica, I believe. Carlton, we're not hearing. I think you're muted. Still not hearing you.
Well, it's for the simple thing I didn't unmute.
That would help.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
Jacqueline, good to see you again as usual. And everyone, thank you for entertaining me on this panel. We talk about the digital transformation and what's happening at the national space. Let me start by saying the national space, the major enablers for transformation, we're still working hard at them. They're not all in place. Of course, there's the regulatory environment that has to change, exactly for government especially. And then there's a digital infrastructure. We are still, the biggest piece of the digital infrastructure is internet access, of course. We're still working on penetration to get to where just about everyone, like Jacqueline says, would be accessible, would have access to the internet, and therefore may be able to kind of engage. And that is separate and apart from them being digitally literate. We're still lagging behind in digital literacy. We have changes in school curriculum and changes in the public policy posture that enables workplace access from government agencies, but also broadly based access for community access points. We have changes in that. We're developing community access points funded through the telecommunications regulatory framework. We have major ways to go in terms of maintaining digital infrastructure and using digital teaching methods and making sure that we have more students acclimated to digital technologies. That is still a ways away. And that is just in our national space. You have, one of our colleagues said, early adopters. And you have these niche economic areas of economic activity where the adoption is quite remarkable. For example, in the retail business, just about every retail vendor has online access. They can sell things online. Out of that has emerged a very vibrant delivery subsystem. I don't know if you see them all the time on bikes running around, sometimes being public nuisances, but that's how you get engagement, and that's how you see some growth. There is a huge increase in the delivery subsector, and that is being fueled by the movement towards some kind of digital processing of orders and so on in the retail sector, especially in the food sector and the restaurant trade and so on. There's a major hindrance to rapid development and the momentum for digital transformation, and that is government policy. government policy and regulations. If you look at, for example, government of Jamaica, the policy, stated policy is that we will create digital public goods and we would breach all of the hindrances by creating these foundational digital public goods that will go towards enabling the digital environment, the digital business environment. So, for example, the National Identification System, Digital National Identification System, that was intended as a foundational tool to put some effort, power behind the digital economy, birthing the digital economy. We have it in train here in Jamaica. The government has set a policy that says digital identification is going to be the sole requirement for identification for a government transaction. Of course, that's policy, but if you look at the regulatory frameworks, for example, for tax collection and for motor vehicle administration, the law and the regulations are still skewed towards analog systems and face-to-face transactions. We are slowly kind of prompting the agencies to move along and change the regulations and government to change the laws as possible. We have those kinds of situations that I'll tell you something about what I see based on my recent connection with the CARICOM Digital Skills Task Force. I co-chair the CARICOM Digital Skills Task Force, and the terms of reference of the task force was to see what was required to mainstream digital transformation for Caribbean economies. Essentially, we noticed the same things. The law and legal and regulatory framework needs to be revamped. The digital infrastructure need to be implemented. New policies about digital telecommunications policies that enable that help to prod the inclusion of others to broadband technologies in places where it is still not available. We have looked at initiatives to change the teaching and learning side of it. So developing digital skills, and we look at it from the production side, from the supply side to the demand side. We look at what kinds of skills are required to power the digital economy and make recommendations at what needs to change in the teaching and learning framework to allow digital skills development at scale. We look at ways that we can begin to engage the regulatory frameworks to actively support digitalization. And it's a whole series of initiatives. But what was interesting is that across the entire Caribbean landscape, the same challenges have emerged. And so the response may be different in Trinidad as in Tobago and as in Barbados and Jamaica, but certainly the elements of what is required to kind of empower digitalization and DT is evident across the region. I finally think in terms of us looking at digital skill sets, one of the things that we see, and I heard it mentioned in an earlier intervention in the earlier part of the program, is the concern that we are not developing enough digital skill sets in persons. but the ones that we develop, we lose them because they migrate to better, greener pastures, as it were. And there are existential reasons why they do that. And so the question becomes, what do we do and how do we access those? So I have always taken the view that since I cannot compete with the existential conditions that will make our assets move away, then the more strategic response is to create frameworks where I can still engage them from afar. And I heard that mentioned this morning, and I fully applaud that move, because to me, the hollering about brain drain and the dearth of digital skill sets in the region it requires a more adept response. And part of that response should be, since we are talking about digital transformation, we should devise ways and methodologies to access the skill sets wherever they are. And as we develop, one of the aspects of talking about preparing people on the supply side, we explicitly recognize that we are going to train people and we're going to lose them. So as part of that training methodology, we have to inculcate the idea that they are accessible from anywhere. So they could sit here and work remotely, or they could go, and if they sit here and work remotely, we have access to them. When I say sit here, I mean in the region. But we should also be thinking about, if they get up and go elsewhere, we should also find a way to have access to them wherever they are. Because of course, we have the enabling infrastructure, which is the internet, which allows us to get to them and all that. So these are the kinds of things that we have to consider. The agility of the strategies that we try to bring to bear on this business of developing skill sets and maintaining access to the skill sets is going to be very, very important to us in terms of how fast the digital transformation takes place and whether or not we have all the tools to enable the digital transformation in the region, especially in terms of the regional economies. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks. Karen, can you give us some information about what's going on with regard to some of these training programs in Trinidad and Tobago? Because I know IGF has been building out access centers and so forth to allow people to come in and use internet to be able, and they have assistance as well in filling out government forms in the new digital way.
Yeah, so I mean, from a government perspective, IGF and the Ministry of Digital Transformation have embarked on a number of different methods or means to be able to assist persons who are less fortunate when it comes to access to the digital assets, whether it be internet, whether it be machines, etc. One thing that was started quite some time before is that many of our libraries, etc., have access to internet that you can actually use as part of the TTIGF project. So that enables persons to have a space where they can actually go and access internet on an often basis. Of course, that project has expanded over time, and it actually now starts to include other areas. While I'm not familiar with the other areas at this point in time, it has been expanded to include many other areas in terms of public spaces. I know buses, for example, were one of the areas that they were testing out to be able to have persons who are on their commute from home to their office to be able to access these services. In addition to that, of course, there's always been the TTMAG service centers where persons can go to get additional information in terms of how to access services, to complete actually doing some of their services, etc. And of course, there's access centers that are being currently built that have internet access. It's also going to be an area where there's going to be training done for different digital courses, etc. I think just recently, MDT did put forward a number of initiatives to have persons trained up in terms of different digital skills. So, I mean, there are some methods put forward, but we know it won't always reach everyone, because not only because there's only a limited amount of persons that you can handle to train properly or have access to these services, but it's also a mindset thing. There are persons who may have challenges in terms of entering this particular realm, and instead of embracing that change, they are more afraid of it or standoffish to it. And I think those are the persons that will be the most difficult to bring across into this journey. And how to address that is really a space where it needs to be studied a bit more, as into how can we get persons more familiar or accustomed, or rather willing to come forward and say, hey, I do not know. I feel a certain way about doing these things. How can I go about then getting up to speed as into what is happening right now when it comes to all our services? We know that digital transformation isn't going to stop now. It's going to be delayed, yes, but it definitely won't stop. So it's going to get more and more digital going forward. And we, as the government, we can't really, yes, you'll have parallel systems, but there'll always be a point of time where costs will come into play, and it will eventually have to go across 100% digital. So we have to prepare persons for that particular time period to be able to move along with the journey. And I think that is something that is very important to be a part of the entire process. I think one area that has not been really that much publicized in terms of what is being done is that there are service centers, a service center that is going to be created that will have special omni-channel service centers that will be created just to deal with digital things that are being put forward in the future. So instead of having just going out to TTIGF, going to other places, there are places now you can actually call and be able to get assistance with those particular digital solutions. So that is another method that will be coming soon to be able to help persons go along this particular journey.
That's cool. One of the things that we've been talking around but haven't hit directly is we've been talking about people with digital skills. What digital skills do we actually think we need for the minimum requirement? How much do we have to train people? Does anyone have any ideas on that? Because we can't, a lot of the times we talk about creating developers, creating coders, all these sorts of things, security people, the higher end. But when we think about that, is not a large percentage of the 1.4 million people in Trinidad and Tobago. So what is the minimum basic level that we think we should need to get the population to say, right, they can access these digital systems?
It's a good question, Jacqueline, because it's one of the questions we looked at as we thought to be inclusive in the CARICOM Digital Skills Task Force initiative. When we look at being inclusive, we thought, what is the baseline for digital skills that we would expect for the general population? And they tend to use some of these baselines from the PAL and some of these organizations. They look at what OECD is doing, and they look at several frameworks from around the world. And we came up with an idea that, simple things like knowing how to type on a keyboard, being able to access the internet, know how to write a document using digital tools, the ability to use the tools, audio tools, video tools, etc., that is available for communication. Those kinds of things. Being able to fill out a form online that will be used for a government transaction. It's something Kern said that kind of remind me that we are always evolving. I mean, government policy and process is always evolving to deal with this. So we started with community access points, where you had to go to a physical place to get support, to learn how to type and learn how to get online and so on. Now we are doing wireless access points, community wireless access points, so that we are rolling those out around the region, around the area. We're also expanding the public infrastructure for government by government. So, for example, we have an initiative going where the government of Jamaica is actually putting in fiber infrastructure for internet access, and they're making that available to schools all over the country. And the initial rollout is using fiber, but last mile is sometimes kind of taken care of with wireless, by wireless means, using the infrastructure of the public providers. So we have those kinds of things happening, and as we go to more individualized access to internet and so on, there's a layer that we're putting in for people to have access to help online for enabling them to use those tools. It is always going to change. Let me make one thing. You mentioned the cybersecurity and all that. Part of the major requirement for enabling internet access safely and securely is to make users more aware of the cybersecurity risks. So we have cybersecurity programs that and try to make them awareness training, more awareness training than anything else. They're using not just public resources, but they're also engaging private sector agents, private sector companies. The banks especially are in the business now of having public seminars for cybersecurity and explaining cybersecurity risks to the public, which includes their customers. And you see a lot of that happening around the country. So the corpus of initiatives that is being used to enable access is expanding as we go along, and it's changing. The way that it is delivered, how it's configured for delivery, all of those things are changing based on the feedback from previous engagements. One other thing that the role of having narratives to explain and give people reason to become digitally proficient and to engage digitally is a very important aspect of this digital transformation initiative. Let me tell you what I mean by creating narratives. In Jamaica, we have use cases where we say, these are the things that you normally do with government agencies, and here are ways that you could attack those online. And what the public information system is doing now is creating narratives around those and publicizing them. The narratives kind of allow ordinary people to kind of instantiate why they go online. And it also drives them to ask for other things because they try to do. Let me give you an example. They can now go online and make an application for a passport. Now the question becomes, if I can make an application for a passport, online, why can't I make an application online for a driver's license? And we see those kinds of things occurring as we develop the narratives. So it is very important for us to look at narratives to drive engagement, because when they're engaged, they begin to see possibilities that drives further roads in a digital transformation process.
Yeah. Don't you have anything you want to put in there? Well, okay.
Definitely. That's bouncing off of what Mr. Samuel said there, and just answering the question, is that in terms of what digital skills are needed, I think it really depends on the stakeholder. I mean, everyone that's involved in digital transformation, which is everyone, will need to skills up in some way. Not because I'm involved in digital transformation means it doesn't mean that doesn't have to skill up. I have to get additional skills to continue to drive, which speaks to what Mr. Samuel said in terms of driven engagement, right? Those who have to interact with the different systems, they need to have at least some level of confidence to be able to operate these digital tools, whether it be on the device or separate devices that be standalone. From the executive level, understanding the benefits, how to be able to better implement and drive these solutions. So to me, it's training across the board for everyone. It's not that just looking at those who may not be as fortunate to be in the place where we can easily access everything and be accustomed to it. So I think one of the areas definitely to help with that engagement, definitely from a government standpoint, is that I don't think we drive enough in terms of marketing and understanding. And again, Mr. Samuel was just talking about the cybersecurity and having persons understand that. And I don't think that there's enough of that happens within Trinidad and Tobago in terms of advertising where you can get internet access, advertising where there may be devices that are available, advertising where you can get these particular programs. I'm not saying that we don't do it. I'm just saying that it should be done on a larger scale. And especially when from the last panel, I was talking about data, we should have information as into where are the communities that may be struggling to move along in this particular area, and then have focused efforts within those particular communities so that we can help those reach up to a certain level where we can be confident that when we bring forth anything, towards the public when it comes to these digital drives, that they can come along for the ride. And as I said, once they get a taste of it and understand it, and they start to save on time, start to save on money, start to save on resources, they're going to ask for more. And then we, being the government of Trinidad and Tobago, will have to deliver more and live up to that expectation. And I think that is the ideal world that we would like to live in when it comes to digital transformation.
There's actually something that a lot of people talk about this techie generation, the ones who use their phones, the ones who are on TikTok and so forth. But there's one question I have about that. Just because you can go and do a specific thing on a specific platform, on a specific app, does that mean that you're digitally literate? Or does that mean that you don't, like, some of these people are, yeah, you can do specific things really, really well. But do you know why you shouldn't just jump on any free Wi-Fi that you find roaming loose because you don't want to spend your data? So, let's see who has Wi-Fi. I jump on it, and what kind of thing? What do you think about that? Is that a step towards digital literacy, or do people think that is digital literacy and don't want to go further necessarily? They think they already know.
The thing for me is that I would prefer to have them there than not. So once they get there, then I have to figure out how to have them navigate the space safely. And that's when we bring in these seminars on digitalization and cybersecurity and risk, telling them how to manage risk in all of this. I see a development here, especially in this market, where, as I told you, the suppliers are taking on the task of helping people to understand what the risks are in some of those behaviors. And it is going across quite well. I mean, you have the big companies putting on seminars, public seminars. You have the telecommunication providers putting on seminars. You have government and schools putting on seminars. So we see that going forward. Here's the thing. You should not underestimate the possibility that a youngster who gets online could be incented, could be inspired to do something beyond just going online and looking at TikTok. I have the view that the more they see, the greater the surface area available to people like us to influence behaviors for them to use it otherwise. Because the more they see, the more examples of what is possible they could pick up from those engagements. And so I want to piggyback on those. So I am one of those who don't believe that I should. I'll tell you one, for example. In this country, there is a strong movement to ban smartphones in schools.
Again, they come back with that again.
It's not come back.
That's why I went into education.
This is in Jamaica, right?
Jacqueline, you'll understand that because we come from the same place. We've had this conversation before.
We have.
Let me give you one scenario that develops. The pushback from the policy people is that we are not going to, we have enough problems getting students to concentrate and focus on the learning operation inside the classroom than for us to spend time policing what they do on the smartphone and where they go on the smartphone. So we would prefer not to allow them to use the smartphone. The corollary to that explanation is, what if they are using the smartphone to actually gather information that enhances or contribute, that is contributory to the learning process? Why would that opportunity not be front and center, top of mind? And that is the disconnect that we have. That is the fight that we have in terms of policy around, say, for example, smartphones in school.
I think that's also an educating the educator problem.
Yes.
Because if you don't know how to utilize these tools in the classroom or in any situation where you're teaching people, then you're afraid of it. Because you can't utilize it properly. If I have students creating, researching, and so forth on their smartphone, then the smartphone is busy. It's too busy to be checking all of these social media things and so on.
Yeah, but there's also to me a lesser, a more even acute misconception. The assumption is that learning happens only in one way. The assumption is that any learning whatsoever, some learnings are verboten. They're not to be encouraged and to be restricted and to be beaten out of them. See, I don't take that view. My view always is, well, I personally just like to know. I like to know things. I don't like to be in an environment where to lack knowledge to me is the greater risk to me.
Mhm.
So my perspective is that they have to open their minds to the idea that learning happens in a different way than they now think. That's the first thing.
Absolutely.
The second thing is that they have to understand that the idea that you can only learn one thing at one time in one place is rubbish too often for them not to accept that. But and people tell you these are philosophical positions that you're taking. That's a pushback I get. Oh, it's a philosophical position that you're taking. It really is not. And I said, if it's a philosophical position, but think about it logically. If you think that you can have multiple modes of learning and multiple ways to learn, and you think there are different learning styles, and you think that there are different learning models, why could you not think of a mashup of all of those things? It is fairly easy for me to accept those things as true and logical, to accepting the fact that I might have a mashup of those things to advance teaching and learning.
Mhm.
But it's what we face.
So, Logan, as we were talking about businesses working with their customers and other people who come into their sphere and getting them trained up with regard to utilizing the digital products safely and securely and so forth. Is there anything that members of the chamber have been doing with your digital transformation committee? Is that something that you're pushing towards?
Yep. So just last week or 2 weeks ago, I think you were there, we had our first session. So with my hat on of chairman of the Digital Business Technology Committee of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, quite a mouthful. This year, we intend to have a series of sessions based on just basically education and disseminating information. So we are committed to at least quarterly, hoping to accelerate that to maybe monthly. And yeah, we think it's important that you know, all of what we've been saying here, I think it permeates across societies, not just consumers or governments, but also in businesses. That the training and the digital adoption needs to be accelerated. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. And
before you go, Jack, can I make one plug? Because now that Larkin talks about the business roundtable and the digital business trying to enable that, one of the biggest things that it needs to be recognized for empowering digital business and digital transformation is access to data. And essentially, the collection of data and the availability of that data for planning and for informing the business models and the efficacy of business models is very critical. And I find, I also sit on boards of commercial companies, a couple of them. And one of the things that we have to do all the time is to remind the business unit leaders how important it is for collecting and storing and curating the data quality and the quality of the data, how important the quality of that data is to the ongoing operational success and market success of the companies. It is something that the other aspect of that is businesses being able to access stores of public data. That is data collected from government transactions. All over the Caribbean, we have a massive amounts of data. But what we have data, what we're missing is information. Because we have no access to the data to pull information from that data. And so we are busy developing data marts and data exchange, memorandum of understanding, and to get people to do recombinant data sets and so on. Is Patrick on? Patrick is one of the first around this region. Patrick Gosine. Patrick, Professor Gosine.
Not today, he'll be on tomorrow.
Not today. I have to, Patrick was one of the first ones in this region to actually do something to actively collect and make data across the region available publicly. So he collect and curate public data sets, and it's on .tt, data.tt, and you will see some there from Jamaica and several places. But that initiative, and this started years ago. This is not today. This started years ago. There's some of us who were thinking about this many years ago. And looking at Patrick, what Patrick has done, we work with Patrick to get some of the data sets and so on. But it is a kind of initiative that we have to continue to encourage and break the ceiling, break the disconnect between government and industry about the role of data in enabling digital business and the digital society and the digital economy that we keep talking about, because it is, without a doubt, data fuels the digital transformation, the digital economy, and the digital, everything digital. Data is absolutely required for it.
Now, I want to do a quick question and answer if anyone has any questions. I know that there is Facebook questions, which I can't see, and if somebody else can. No questions?
I see our friend Glenn McKnight.
Glenn, you want to?
Hi, Glenn. Glenn is making mention of the role we can play in having effective partnerships in developing communication models for humanitarian challenges that we face. We have them in the region, especially in terms of disaster recovery and when those happen. It's good for Glenn to remind us that that is one way we can advance the agenda by forming partnerships. And there are lots of organizations that are available and willing to help. I see Jolie McPhee is on also. He's been a long-time proponent of these partnerships to help us to get access to data and access to knowledge and information about what each of us is doing to help all of us. So I just thought I'd give a shout out to those two for being a part of the agenda.
Hi, Glenn. Glenn, do you have any comments you'd like to make? You can just unmute and... Checking to see if there are any questions elsewhere. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so let's continue. I think we're nearly out of time, so the question we have is, when we think about the broad range... Hello?
We're hearing you.
Was that someone trying to get on? Okay. Yeah, when we think about the broad range of people that we have to deal with regard to a national or even better, a Caribbean-wide digital transformation. We've got a huge range in terms of age, in terms of skills, in terms of the way they feel about technology, to the amount of access they have, the funds they have, whether they're going to be using phones, tablets, laptops. We've got disabilities and so on. How do we work a system that can manage to touch all of these very, very different and disparate groups? Because it can't be one system. It's got to be a system made up of lots of different modalities to address each of these audiences. And some of these audiences also cross. So you may have school children, but you also have school children with disabilities who may not be able to use a cell phone. We have adults. We have older folk who are technologically literate. We've got older folk who have disabilities. We've got younger. There's a huge range of things. And we can't just say, okay, well, you can go down to this center because you may not be mobile to go down to that center. You may not be able to type. You may have to dictate. And how do we develop apps that work for all these people and that we can train all these people to use to get the services they want? Because the main thing is that they want to function in a digital world. They need to function. You can't leave them outside of it. And that's a really big question. But
I don't think that's an easy question to answer. Main thing being that each person or each individual, as I said, may respond to different methods. What has to happen, and this goes back to the data opportunity here again, is that with every sprint, and in terms of we look at it from an agile perspective, with every sprint, with every thing that is tried, there's supposed to be some data to find out, did this work? How many people did it touch? Can it be repeatable again? And while yes, we can look on anyway and find the different methods that they may have to be able to teach these things, it doesn't always necessarily work because there's also culture that plays a big part in terms of being able to be a part of these particular initiatives. So these things also need to be taken into perspective. What may work for Jamaica may not necessarily work for Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, I'm not saying that there won't be similarities, etc., that we're not willing to try it. But we have to also know that the answers are not always out there on the internet. There are suggestions, there are thoughts there, but we have to also develop our own ways to go about reaching our own personnel to be able to address these. So in terms of a specific way of how we can go about doing this, I don't think that there is one. However, what we can go about doing is trying different means and methods and documenting it, having data and having that data available so that persons can either replicate it and as such, eventually be able to touch almost every single individual within the country of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, Logan?
I'd like to have a go. And I hope I'm not sounding like a stuck record, but I'm coming back to that bell curve. And if I may, could I share my screen? Am I allowed to share my screen now just to show that? Yeah, let me try just so we can visualize what I'm talking about here. It's this. Right. So this is the technology adoption curve or diffusion curve, depending on which way you look at it, like I described earlier. And this is how technology gets adopted by all markets, it's a social thing. And so my answer to your question, Jackie, is we can't, especially in Trinidad and with the economies and so on, we can't try to boil the ocean and try to do everything all at once. we must start with early adopters and the early markets and make things work there first. Now, I'm glad I brought this up because it reminds me about this concept called the chasm. And this is a very well-known book written by, I think it's Gordon Moore or someone like that. I think it's Gordon Moore wrote it. And it's well known that many times you don't actually get to the mainstream market. It just remains, you know, a tech thing that just kind of stays as I actually think that we're still here in Trinidad. We're still here. I don't see, when I go out to businesses, when I talk to customers, I don't see that the way that companies are digitalized, we're not here. We're still here. And so to come back to the training, how do we do it? I think we need to focus on the early markets, make those work, and then socially, and many other things, but socially, that's how we're going to cross the chasm, is by let's focus on the early adopters, successes, and and learn from them, of course. That's my 2 cents. That's what I think.
One of the things that I've seen happening in communities a lot is that one person learns and then they come back and they teach their community. And that's a project, that's a type of thing that seems to work well. But we do need some sort of incentive to have people. Not everyone will come and spend time volunteering to teach people in their community.
Yeah.
Not everybody is that altruistic, but that's a concept that IGov might think about utilizing.
Absolutely.
Can I
the trainer kind of approach as well, yeah?
It needs to be done, yeah.
Can I tell you my view on this? I first start with the mindset. To my mind, it always begins with what do I know and when do I know it? So for everything, I need to know what I know. And then it informs what I do about what I know to meet an objective. I know that I don't know enough about all of these various groups and various needs on my own. So that is where the collaboration comes in. I am always open to collaborative processes where each one teach one. Somebody tells me what I don't know, and maybe if we knock heads together, we could devise a solution that mean more to a lot of others than just the two of us. So that's where I start. Karen is absolutely correct that if you take the approach that you don't know everything and you don't know where everyone is, and your job is to meet them where they are, then you have to be agile about what the approach you're going to take. And always be informed by the data, by what you know, and always collect data and information to inform the next round of engagement. And he rightly notes that things bleed into each other. There are communities, there are sets that have similarities. And where those are evident, then it makes the next go around so much easier to engage. And I've always used that as my approach in devising a strategy. It seems to work well for me so far. And I would always recommend it to everyone. In an environment, I always begin with the idea that I don't know what I need to know. And so I try to find people who would know more than me about what is there, and then develop a collaborative mechanism for knowledge diffusion so we can build a response that will probably, in my opinion, reach more people than if I did it on my own. That's always the recommendation for me.
Yeah, I agree. Good. Any comments on that?
No, I think it's great. It's a great conversation because we're seeing two different perspectives in terms of how it can be addressed. So I guess this still speaks to how, because Mr. Samuels and I have a similar idea, but Mr. Combs has a different way in terms of approaching it. Not saying that anyone is more correct than the other, but just there alone, there could be different mechanisms or different ways that we can go about doing this entire exercise, which is, to me, is great, because then at least we won't feel defeated when we actually go about any particular solution and we are not successful. There's always something to fall back on to go ahead to keep pushing, try and get this particular initiative done.
And there's also the fact that if it doesn't work, you've at least learned something about, so the next time it'll be better. And look, is that some of the things that you do with entrepreneurship and your accelerator and the learnings that you use and apply in the accelerator program for businesses?
Yeah. So it's like there's these different concepts in business world, lean startup, and that apply, and agile and so on that apply. And what these speak to is, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to experiment. And the purpose of the experiment is to learn what you don't know and then move it like that. But I'd like to just mention a specific idea that I had, and I've got it on my website, and I'd just like to mention it, is that what we find, we're a small company, right, at Neo Digital, and what we're trying to do is to help businesses with digital transformation. And the biggest barrier that we have is actually training and change management. Yes, it's mindset, exactly. That's the biggest barrier we have. And so I one day I was thinking, I was frustrated, and I was thinking, what could we do about this? And I came up with this idea, and I'd like to mention it. And it's about, I actually call it a digital transformation acceleration program, because it's like this, right? There's, of course, your audience, everyone here will know about open source software. There's a huge amount of open source software that does pretty much everything. Almost anything that any commercial software product has, there's an open source project that somewhat does that as well. And so the thought I had was, if we could take open source software, make it available to everyone, I mean everyone, alongside training programs. It's kind of like what, I love what the Developers Hub is doing. It's something like that, but that's only one side of it. What we're trying to create is a virtuous relationship between consumers of technology and producers of technology. The problem we have right now in the islands is that we are just consumers. We're not developing or producing any. So that, in the last session, we were talking about spending on software being a high cost, foreign exchange on software. It's huge. Most companies do that. So my thought was, and the idea around this program is to try to turn us from a society of consuming software into a society of creating software. But in order to do that, you need to create demand. So it's kind of like putting together these two, supply and demand, where on one hand you have students can come, or anyone, not just students, anyone can come into this platform, learn about it, create software. So that's the supply side. And then on the other side is the business and the government who needs these software. And so if we could put those things together, what it creates is a virtuous relationship where, one drives the other. Eventually you get a flywheel happening. And then that's one of the ideas that I wanted to mention. It's something that, like I said, we're a small company. We've got the software. We've got a training platform, and I'm looking for collaborators. And it's something that we're actually, I'm looking for collaborators. So I'll put the link out on the chat later on that.
Okay. Well, while you're talking about that, what are some of the needs that companies have with regard to their new staff? What are the needs? When you have either you have a current company that's transitioning or transforming, and you have a new startup, what are the things that you need? What are the new jobs of tomorrow? Because we've got we've got loads of jobs. We've got loads of job titles. We've got buildings full of job descriptions. But what are the new ones?
It's a good point because, again, coming back to the supply and demand, we talked about training other people, but where will they work? What jobs are they going to have? So one of the things that we encourage in all our engagements is, okay, you need to create new jobs, basically, because you're going to be doing something different than what you used to do before. So okay, we're coming to do this project, but, there needs to be new, at least, if you're a small company, at least new roles. You need to recognize those roles. But in a larger company, new jobs, literally new positions created to sustain and take that technology forward. Now, what would those positions be? So, I would say we're kind of behind, right? We are just still now catching up. When I say we, as a nation in the Caribbean, we're still now catching up on Web 2.0 technology, right? SaaS, software as a service and cloud and all this stuff. Companies are only just now adopting those. So I would say we're very early. However, those are not jobs of the future, but I would say we need those. So skills, web developers, Python programmers, data scientists, ML engineers. These are the jobs. There's just four job titles right there that are needed. Pretty much most companies of a certain size need those now and in the future. And I think it's up to so it's something that in the chamber we are pushing, because it's up to business leaders to actually create those jobs, right? Because, the incumbents aren't going to come and create the jobs. People in the jobs, they do what they're told, right, by the bosses. So the bosses actually have to come and say, okay, there's this new position now, and this is what you need to do. And it's not an IT administrator. It's not that, right? It's brand new jobs.
Yeah, I would like to just add on to what Mr. Camp is saying. Definitely data scientists, data engineers, developers, data analysts. Even with the new LLMs and AI, we definitely have to have persons that are more focused in terms of being able to do things like prompt engineering, etc. But it's not always as clear as that, because that, to me, that is still a phase that we have to get to. And we can't just, for example, hire a data engineer, but you're not even sure as yet where you're going to collect your data, etc. So there's just that little step before you can get to those jobs in the future. And I think that it's very important to understand that, because we also don't want businesses to, we are futuristic and make all these positions and hire these persons, and then the person's either very underutilized and then becomes basically a negative in terms of the bottom line for that particular business. So I think it's the analysis of what is actually needed for your particular business, what you need in short term, medium term, and long term is something that definitely has to be planned out, especially for jobs of the future. Because to me, those jobs are no longer futuristic. I think that's more present. It's future for us, but it's present in terms of the global industry.
Yeah.
Can I say with Kern on this again, because my view is this: I think the better posture, because I know it's going to take a lot time for me to ramp up to where I'm going to need them, is that I should set off and grow income, and you can start inside. Everywhere where I've ever hired people, and I've been in jobs where I hire a lot of people, I always hire for attitude. I always hire for attitude. I fire for aptitude. but I hire for attitude. And let me tell you what my attitude is. Someone who demonstrates that they have some critical skills. If they have critical thinking skills, I am absolutely sure that I can grow them into just about anything I want in this space. And to me, the truth is I am not one who's into the skies falling thing. Because like Kern, I know most of what we're saying we need. The takeoff point where we need these rounded skills, we're not there yet, but we have the time to grow into it. And so to me, the strategy ought to be, what do I do to grow them into it? And how do I select them for growth? And that is where my focus would be. And if I give advice to companies, I say, scan your environment and look for the ones who have demonstrable critical thinking skills and start helping them to navigate a growth process, a process where you're acquiring knowledge in the layers that you need them as you go along.
And what about things like actual skills versus certifications? You know, in the Caribbean, we love a degree, a piece of paper. We must always have paper to say we did something, but we never show a portfolio to say, I've been to this class and I passed the exam, but can I do it? Where's my, why don't we ask for portfolios? Why do we need degrees and not proven ability to do what you want people to do?
Yeah.
That's why I have hired people as engineers who came to me with all they have is a screwdriver, a Phillips screwdriver, and a spanner in the back pocket. And they say, well, you know, I said, what do you do? He says, well, you know, I can fix things. I figure out. And you put him to fix the thing, he sit there for 3 hours looking at it. And then he comes up with a solution. I've had so many of those types that today are working well regarded in the industry simply because they demonstrate that they have critical thinking skills. They didn't have any certification, they just have a spanner and a screwdriver in the back pocket. And
I had this discussion just yesterday.
And this, I'm talking to lived experience here. I've been CIO for several operations and I've been managing technical people from I was maybe 40 years ago. And so I have developed a sense of what it is that I see and how it can be cultivated into what it is that I would wish to have. And I think it served me well over a period of time. I'm suggesting to you that sometimes the unconventional approach to finding talent and growing talent is more important than looking at the certifications that people are, because I have certifications and degrees, but I doubt if I'm expert at any one thing. And so I have humility enough to know that all the certification and all the skills and all the degrees I have simply will not help me in some things that I would wish to do. But I could learn it if I apply myself to it. And it's the same thing I think of anybody that I'm going to hire.
But then we have the regulations that say, for example, if you want somebody, a web developer, they must have a bachelor's degree in computer science.
So I could actually touch on that a little bit, especially from where we're in a strict environment of what experience and skills that you need to have to be able to be hired in a particular position, right? And yes, we do have that issue, and we have to basically meet that criteria. But what we're actually starting to see now is that we can't find those persons because those persons with that level of skill and experience, they're already working for huge, large organizations that are paying them significant monies that the government of Trinidad and Tobago will not be able to pay you such. So just like what Mr. Samuels said there, we have to basically now kind of have a sort of a program where we have like interns, where we have persons who maybe have for one particular skill, but then demonstrated one in another, and then be able to skill up those persons to be able to meet demand. The only issue that happens after a while is that when they're skilled and they know they're skilled, it's either they go or they be like, well, okay, I no longer want to operate at this particular salary.
Yeah.
Can I have a larger salary? And that's where the issue comes in. I know in one of the previous, in the previous discussion, it was discussed that the system that we have right now is not really suited to be able to help us moving forward. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we have in terms of we have to fulfill this criteria, which we can't meet, but we also don't have anything to help persons grow. And when they grow, make them feel appreciated as a resource and make them feel wanted in an organization. That, okay, we saw you as an intern before, you are no longer at that stage. Let's move you into a different position where you can feel that you of yourself in your career has grown, not just in knowledge, but also, I mean, at the end of the day, salaries with people that buy groceries, etc. So those systems need to be tweaked to be able to help organizations, especially those that can't pay the significant amount of monies that are being paid from outside, to be able to develop persons and understand, just as Mr. Samuel said, that they will leave, but we can then get someone else and be able to get them up the path, maybe even a quicker time frame than the first person that went through that particular rigors to become to that level.
Yeah. Now we have in the chat, Emerson is talking about universities and research centers where the universities can develop the competencies and the technology so that they can create courses and then train people in these areas. And some of them that he talked about are AI, nanotechnology, big data, etc. And then Nigel Casimir from CTU, hi Nigel, asks how do we see AI impacting or changing the training needs and jobs required in the short term? And I'd like to say from my perspective as an educator, trainer, so on, is that AI is I'm currently using AI in some of my e-learning projects. And what it does is that it makes life so much easier. If I use it in particular ways, I can get things done a lot faster. I can get things done. I can churn. There's certain areas in e-learning that you churn out things, and it makes life easier to build templates, to create certain things over and over and over again for different courses, to create look and feel that stays exactly the same as the way you go through. And it's really fast. But right now I'm not using it to replace any of the knowledge or the content that we're doing, because that's what our actual skill is. But what do you think about that in the fields that you're in?
I would say I'm quite excited about the possibilities of AI in transforming education, actually. I think it'll take a couple of years, which relatively speaking isn't long, but the way in which you're using, I mean, you were talking about AI there, you're talking about generative AI, right?
Yeah.
So the way in which like ChatGPT and so on, that right now is a standalone kind of product, very, very powerful, but standalone.
Yeah.
What's going to happen across all industries? And now I'm referring to education, but of course all industries, is that type of intelligence, which is what that intelligence is going to come into the normal workflow of different businesses and sectors. So if we talk about education workflow, it's really exciting. I've seen prototypes and demos of where the possibilities that everyone can have a personal tutor. I mean, literally, so that chat GPT or whatever it is becomes your personal tutor, and it knows everything. It literally knows everything. And they actually showed, about I was watching something, it was showing the bell curve of people who were trained just in classroom settings versus with personal tutors. And it's like 25% better or more, I don't know, more effective.
Yeah.
And so when I see that, now, but of course, who can afford a personal tutor? But with AI now, it should be affordable to everyone. So, that's really exciting. It's not here yet, but it's going to come soon.
Well, it's coming very soon. Because yesterday I was talking to one of my execs about about our private AI and training it on the data that we use and the materials that we use. So on, so that we can actually have it, but of course it's based on our information. I'm not no hallucinations, no fake citations, just clean, straight organizational data and data that we can get from across the board. So it's really, a lot of it is just getting that data, that clean data, training because you can license any of the models now, train it on your own data, and then you can have it. We can create learning that is personalized based on your response here, your request there.
Correct.
It's wonderful.
And then imagine an agent which is proactive in mentoring you because it knows about the tests, it's presenting tests and exercises specifically to you as a trainee and taking you on a path. Basic at whichever pace you want it to. So that's a really exciting opportunity, I think.
And you can connect that.
Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of AI. I mean, Jacqueline says it's based on the training data. So you have the training data. That if the training data is not good, you're going to get a crappy AI system. So the data scientists and the role of data management and the role of librarians and people who are trained in information theory and language is very critical and important. I spoke to some of my library school graduates. I teach in a library school here time to time. And they were quite surprised when I tell them that your skill set is needed more than ever with AI because you are going to be sitting at the table determining what the training data is going to be, where the data is coming from, the quality of that data, and so on. Here's the other thing that I always tell people. AI is based, the way it behaves is based on set theory, as well as, believe it or not, vector theory. So if you understand vectors and you understand set theory, you are in the game already. So I always tell people, if you don't understand set theory, go understand it now, because the entire AI framework is about having quality data in which set and vector theory is applied. That is what works. So at the baseline, know those things, know how those things operate, know what it is about for you to become involved in any kind of AI system setup. Now, the good thing about AI, and Lachlan, you mentioned that in your response, is that the more you use it, the better it becomes at giving you good quality output. So again, you have to devise, and somebody mentioned, was it you, Karen, who mentioned prompt engineering? Prompt engineering is interesting because prompt engineering is predicated on having a keen understanding about language and how language is used. So all the things you learn about a sentence and a sentence structure and parts of speech and all those things, this is when it becomes really important for you to understand that. So I always tell folks, here is an opportunity to apply the basic knowledge that you have in these areas. That is all it is. And so get with it. Don't be afraid of it. Jump in and start doing your thing. That's what I always thought.
Just to jump off of what Mr. Samuel said in terms of jump in and see what you find. I mean, we have been doing some experiments with LLMs for a little while now in terms of helping improve our chatbots that we already have. So that's being able to help with customer service in terms of trying to fast track some of the different processes that we have internally. So there's a lot of experimentation that is happening right now in terms of trying to understand where we can use it and how we can use it and what systems we need to have alongside it to make it even better. So what right now we see AI is not even a standalone like how Mr. Camps referred to there, but actually as a tool and part of a total system that helps make that system improve significantly, right? In terms of cutting down time, in terms of cutting down number of resources that is needed across AI. So AI in itself, and we are now touching what we can do with large language models. There's a lot further that we can go, and I'm already seeing that by the end of this year, there'll be a significant change in how we use even more basic devices like phones, etc., because they are coming accompanied with those particular devices.
Yeah, I would agree that, and I'd just like to add that just to come back to both of those points that you guys made, is that even though, all these things about sets and vectors and all this stuff of things, these large language models, they know almost everything about general knowledge. And therefore, the critical skill that you need is just a language, English, so you can talk to it and you can interact with it, and everything else, it has it. So it's a really exciting time. I think it's going to change. It's going to change the nature of work for all of us. The way I see it is like how, if you go back, say, 20 years ago before the internet, and then the browser came, and the browser just brought the internet to everyone. Basically, AI is the next browser for the next generation of technology. And so instead of going, like now today, we go onto our website and we click and we click and we sing, in the future, we're going to just use AI and it's going to do all of that. It's like another abstraction layer on top of everything that we have. And so that's going to change everything. It's quite exciting.
Yeah. English is the new programming language.
Exactly, correct. That's a thing.
Yeah. We kind of out of time. So if anybody, if you just go around and get your last thoughts quickly, and then we'll wrap up. So we start with Kern, and then Carlton, and then Loken. That works for you?
That's fine. I guess speaking from the perspective of government, I think that it's clear that digital transformation has a lot of benefits, and it's a journey. It's not something that's going to happen rapidly within a short space of time, but over periods of time, being able to improve and get to different areas. And I think that definitely this journey is not just led by one particular party. It has to be led by everyone and all the different stakeholders, meaning that everyone has a particular part to play to be able to go about being successful in digital transformation. And I think too that we also need to keep in mind, and I think it was mentioned here within this particular panel, that digital transformation isn't just the technology of moving something from a manual process into a digital one. It's actual a change of mindset. It's a change of how we think. It's also a way of, I would say, a process that needs to happen for us to be able to get to that next level, to reap all the benefits that we see that other countries have when they have effectively implemented digital transformation activities. I also want to thank the members of the panel here. It was a very interesting conversation, and was glad to be a part of it.
Gosine?
Well, first of all, thank you to my fellow panelists. Thank you, Jacqueline, for inviting me to this panel. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The conversation is always invigorating, as it is enlightening. From where I sit, we're into digital transformation, but we are going at it in fits and starts. Primarily because all of the things that we need to do as prerequisites for transformation, not in place. The infrastructure is not in place. Some of the things that would enable the motion, especially in terms of government services, and moving from the face-to-face to the digital online transformation that is anticipated. We're still being blocked. There's still hurdles based on the current law and regulations. The digital infrastructure that we have is not available to everybody. We are always concerned that we don't leave anyone behind, so it has to be inclusive in terms of the transformation. We're also mindful that the skill sets that we need to power transformation, we don't have all of them, and we have to grow them as we go along. So we have to develop strategies that address all of these things together and at once. That's part of the challenge that we have. What do we do? Knowing what we have, what do we do to orchestrate movement forward when we have taken all of these bits and pieces? I think we are up to the task. From a whole of society perspective, I think it's important for us to develop narratives for explaining to people and showing our people what is possible with DT. And I am certainly one of those who believe that when you give them an idea and they see it come through in a narrative, they're going to begin to want more, and then they foster the growth and we increase the momentum of the change. I am hopeful that I do a lot of transformation coaching, and I'm working a couple of projects that are funded from the multilaterals, and in every single one of them, the way they think it works is not the way it works, and we have to be mindful that when we are describing what it is that we want to achieve with transformation, it is grounded in fact and existence. We need to bring it to the ground and tackle it where we are. And this, if is there anything I always tell persons I'm dealing with about digital transformation, you can't start where you don't know. You have to know where you are to begin the journey. And so the principle and the first requirement is for you to know where you are. And that's how I take this approach. Everything else is added on to me when I know where I am and I know where I want to get to. So as long as I have a stake in the ground as to what my objective is, I know where I am, I can find a way to navigate. I can access different strategies to address all the things I know that needs to be addressed in order for forward motion. So that's my approach to it.
So I'll repeat what I've said a few times before. I think that the transformation has changed, and it's about technology adoption, and we need to focus on the early adopters, both not just people, but also use cases within your business, within your You can't digitalize everything all at once. Focus on the early adopters. That said, it's exciting times because I mentioned about the start of the internet. At the beginning of the internet, all of us on this call here remember pre-internet days. We're old enough to remember that. Well, now we're just about to go into there's 5, 7 technologies that are as big as the internet that are just about to impact us in the next 20 years. Those are AI, blockchain, 3D printing, what was the other one? The supercomputer, quantum computers. All of these technologies are going to become mainstream in the next 10 and 20 years. And if we're talking about digital transformation education, that is what we need to get ready for. The amount of change that's going to happen in the next 20 years, it's more than any other time, more than the last 1,000 years, actually, which is hard to even fathom, but it's going to happen. So it's exciting. And the most exciting thing about it is, like we said, especially because of these large language models, you really just need to be able to speak a language, to speak English, and you can use it. And so all those technologies are going to put trillions of dollars into the world economy. And Trinidad and Tobago, our little part of the world and of that world economy, we have an opportunity to go and carve out our piece in it because there's a huge opportunity. So, and finally, thank you for the opportunity to be on this esteemed panel. Thank you, fellow panelists.
Well, thank you all very, very much. And thank you to the audience who sent in a couple of interesting questions. And then we call on our chair to wrap up.
Oh, Jackie, thank you very much. Thank you very much for a wonderful, very stimulating, thought-stimulating discussion. Listen to the 2 panels today, a quote comes to mind. Some people know it as, refer to it as Einstein quote, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. But I like to use it in different words. And I quote, "You will achieve what you have never achieved before when you start doing what you have never done before." So panelists, I want to thank you all. It was really an amazing, both panelists I'm talking to here, it was really an amazing session. And I would like to, invite the conversation, or hope that I know the conversation is going to continue tomorrow. And day 2, we're going to have a youth forum on day 2 from about 9 a.m. And then after lunch, we're going to have from 1 p.m., we're going to have a youth forum. They have submitted, they were given a question. The youth were given a question. Let's work together to build the internet of tomorrow. What are your ideas? And we have had a couple of videos. We're going to be showing the videos first. And then our moderator there will be Ken Suknanan, who will take the discussion to lunch. And after that, we're going to have the first session in the afternoon, which is Beyond Fintech, Navigating TT's Current Trends Towards the Next Financial Wave. And of course, the moderator there will be Jerry and Paul, one of the directors of TTMAG. And following that very interesting discussion would be something that you all were talking about today. The AI we want, where is it at and where is it heading? The moderator for that afternoon session will be George Gobin, also a director of TTMAG and also TTNIC. So I would like to thank every one of you all for a really wonderful morning. It has been tremendous. I totally enjoyed it. I was, really enthused by the questions, by the participation of the audience, and by the level of commitment by the panelists. Unfortunately, I don't have lunch for anyone. So I will ask you all to go have your lunch now, because I want you to be fortified for tomorrow's session. So thank you all very much for being here, being part of the TTIGF 2024, the Trinidad and Tobago Internet Governance Forum 2024. I thank you all for participating and look forward for sharing some more stimulating ideas tomorrow as we collaborate on looking forward to the internet we want. Thank you very much and have yourselves a very good evening. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Hey.